My name is Charlotte, and I married Mickey when I was 25. We met at a party. Mickey always told me, you can be a stay-at-home wife if you want. My income is enough for us to live comfortably, but I loved my job and kept working at the company I joined right after high school. In the second year of our marriage, I decided to quit my job. The reason was a phone call from my father-in-law. He told me my mother-in-law had collapsed. I cared a lot about my kind and gentle mother-in-law. Since Mickey couldn't leave work, I rushed to see her alone. When I arrived, she smiled weakly at me from her hospital bed, surrounded by tubes. She wasn't in immediate danger, but her condition left her needing care. We had to decide who would take care of her before she was discharged. At first, I thought Angelina, my unmarried sister-in-law who lived with her parents, would handle it. She worked mostly from home, so it seemed logical, but Angelina firmly refused. She even told her mother in the hospital, I'm not just sitting around at home, I can't take care of Mom, you need to manage yourself better. Her words shocked me. How could she say something so cold when her mother was unwell? Later, Angelina called Mickey and insisted on a meeting at the family home. Mickey and I went there to discuss the situation with Angelina and my father-in-law. At the meeting, Angelina repeatedly said, I can't take care of Mom. I don't know how to manage the housework now that she's unwell. Father-in-law, who had always relied on his wife for everything, also didn't seem willing to help. Mickey tried to convince Angelina to take care of their mother, but she refused every time. It became clear they were expecting me to do it. I felt attached to my job. I'd been there since high school, but I couldn't stand watching the family argue and push the responsibility onto someone else. My mother-in-law had been so kind to me, and I wanted to support her. So, I made my decision. I said, I'll quit my job and take care of her. We'll live together from now on. Please treat me well. My father-in-law thanked me warmly, saying, Thank you, Charlotte, but Angelina didn't seem happy at all. Mickey asked me, Are you sure about this? If it's too much, we can hire a professional to take care of Mom. I nodded and said, It's okay. I felt I owed a lot to my mother-in-law. Hiring a professional would cost money, and I worried it might make her uncomfortable. I believed it would be better for her to be cared for by family, even though I was just her daughter-in-law. I knew my father-in-law wasn't someone who handled responsibilities well, and Angelina had a mean-spirited personality. I was anxious about living with them, but I quit my job, moved in, and started our new life together. Living with my in-laws turned out to be even harder than I expected. Mother-in-law's health made her feel frustrated and embarrassed. She often apologized to me, saying, I'm so sorry you have to take care of me, even for something as simple as helping her to the bathroom. Seeing her like that broke my heart. On top of that, Angelina's bullying became a heavy emotional burden. I came from a family without much money and had worked since high school instead of going to college. Angelina often mocked my education. For example, while eating the food I cooked, she'd talk to father-in-law about work and suddenly say, Oh, sorry, Charlotte, this conversation might be too complicated for someone who only finished high school. I shouldn't have brought it up. Or she'd say, You're just a lowly high school graduate daughter-in-law, so at least take care of Mom properly. Mother-in-law would scold her whenever she overheard, saying, Don't say such things to Charlotte. Angelina didn't like being scolded, so she started bad-mouthing me behind my back when mother-in-law wasn't around. She'd say things like, I have a respectable job, and Charlotte's just a high school graduate. It's only natural for her to do the housework, but at least cook something that tastes good for once. It's always terrible. One day, while I was cooking, she said this again. I even thought about not serving her a meal at all. Despite everything, I held back. When Angelina found a spot I hadn't cleaned perfectly, she'd loudly say things like, Wow, the trashy daughter-in-law can't even tell the difference between dirt and trash. Look at all this garbage piled up. Even then, I didn't respond. I didn't want anyone, especially my mother-in-law, to find out that Angelina and I weren't getting along. It would have been too much for her to handle. When my mother-in-law asked, Angelina isn't being mean to you, is she? I'd smile and say, I'm fine. Mickey often worried about me too, asking, Are you sure you're not pushing yourself too hard? I lied to him as well, replying, I'm fine. Mickey worked hard under a strict boss, and I didn't want to add family issues to his stress. My father-in-law, on the other hand, acted like he didn't notice how much I was being insulted. To him, it probably didn't matter what Angelina said to me as long as someone was taking care of the housework. I reminded myself why I was doing this, for my mother-in-law, who had always been kind to me, and for Mickey. These thoughts kept me going as I cared for her for an entire year. Then, one day, my mother-in-law passed away peacefully in her sleep. At the funeral, Angelina accused me through tears, saying, "Mama died because you didn't take proper care of her. You're such a useless, trashy daughter-in-law." Her words hit me hard. I had done everything I could for my mother-in-law, but now I couldn't stop wondering if it was my fault. Maybe I had missed something, and maybe I wasn't good enough. During the funeral, I felt completely numb, like an empty shell. Mickey was kind and tried to comfort me, but Angelina kept making comments whenever he wasn't around. After the funeral, Angelina kept saying things like, "You're really useless." With my mother-in-law gone, there was no reason for me to keep living with my in-laws. One day, as I stood in my suit looking at her empty bed, my father-in-law approached me and pleaded, "Please, Charlotte, my wife has passed away, but can't you continue living with us?" He couldn't do any housework, and I couldn't imagine Angelina stepping up either. It was clear he wanted me to stay on as a housekeeper. I was shocked, but more than anything, I was appalled that he'd make such a request right after my mother-in-law's funeral. I thought, this man only thinks about himself. I didn't answer right away. I told him, "I need to consult with Mickey, I can't decide on my own." He clung to me, begging, "Please, I'm begging you," but I stood firm, saying I'd talk to Mickey first. The conversation ended without any resolution. A few days later, Mickey said to me, "Charlotte, Mom has passed away. There's no need to live together anymore. Let's move out and live just the two of us. You've been through so much, haven't you?" I felt a huge sense of relief. I wanted to end this cohabitation too. With my mother-in-law gone, there was no reason to stay with Angelina, who insulted me, or with my father-in-law, who treated me like a housekeeper. Grateful for Mickey's understanding, we decided to leave the in-laws' house and start fresh as a couple. Our plan to move out was completely crushed by Angelina. "What? I won't allow you to leave," she shouted furiously when Mickey and I told her and my father-in-law about our decision. "Saying something like this right after Mom's gone is too heartless." Mickey defended me, saying, "It's not heartless. Charlotte took really good care of Mom. She deserves to be free now." Angelina snapped back, "A high school graduate like her can't find a job now. If she can't be useful to society, she should at least stay here and do housework to be useful to Dad and me." Mickey stood up for me again. "Charlotte was excellent at her job. You have no right to talk to her like that." Despite his protests, Angelina stormed out of the room, yelling, "Neither Mickey nor Charlotte is leaving this house." The discussion ended abruptly. But Mickey wasn't deterred. "We can just leave on our own," he said, and began looking for a new place. I started preparing for the move too, balancing housework and property searches while keeping things orderly to avoid Angelina's complaints. Unfortunately, Angelina noticed and started sabotaging me. When I organized our belongings, she'd scatter them around, shouting, "Heartless person, I'll never let you leave this house." When I made calls to real estate agents, she'd snatch my phone and tell them, "Please ignore that conversation, it's not happening." Her behavior became completely out of control. Mickey confronted her every time, but she just screamed back, "Your wife is the worst, you have no eye for women." Nothing ever changed. One evening during dinner, when Mickey and I were at our wits' end, Angelina suddenly spoke to me in an unusually cheerful tone. "Charlotte, tomorrow my fiancé is coming over. I know you're a useless piece of trash, but try to use your brainless head and read the room, okay?" I was used to being berated at the dinner table when Mickey wasn't around, but the word fiancé coming out of Angelina's mouth caught me off guard. I couldn't help but think, there's actually a man in the world who wants to marry her? It was rude, but I was genuinely shocked. Throughout dinner, she kept telling me to be a good girl tomorrow, and I responded vaguely, ending the day doing housework as usual. The next day, Angelina dressed more stylishly than I'd ever seen her and brought her fiancé, Randolph, to the house. He wore a well-fitted suit, was polite, and seemed intelligent. Again, I thought to myself, why would someone like him want to marry Angelina? As I prepared drinks, I overheard their conversation in the living room. Angelina was speaking in a sweet, cajoling voice to Randolph and my father-in-law. "That girl you saw earlier is Mickey's wife. She can't do anything. I do all the housework in this house, and I worked so hard to take care of our late mom. Honestly, I think Mom could have lived longer if that girl hadn't stressed her out so much." I froze. Her words felt like a slap in the face. I had been holding back for so long, enduring her insults so I wouldn't burden Mickey or my mother-in-law, but this time, the anger I'd suppressed all year came rushing out. Everything, every chore, every moment spent taking care of mother-in-law, was my work. Angelina never helped with anything. Determined, I walked into the living room with the drinks. Smiling, I greeted Randolph. "Hello, as you were introduced, I'm the high school graduate, bottom of the barrel, useless trash. Nice to meet you." Angelina let out a panicked shout. "What are you doing?" But I continued calmly. "Angelina really guides me well. She evaluates every meal I make as tasteless, laughs while calling me trash cleaning trash, and blames me for mother-in-law's early passing because of my so-called incompetence." Angelina snapped. "What are you saying?" She stormed over and yanked my hair, screaming, "Stop it." Randolph looked shocked and confused, stammering, What is going on?" I felt sorry for him. Clearly, he had never seen this side of Angelina, but I hoped this moment would make him rethink marrying her. I felt like I had saved Randolph from a terrible situation, so I excused myself mentally for causing the chaos. "Well then, the trash will leave now," I said before walking out of the in-laws' house, taking only my valuables. Father-in-law sat silently, not wanting to get involved, while Angelina raged furiously and Randolph, near tears, tried to calm her down. Watching their reactions felt oddly refreshing. I left and went to stay at my parents' house. When I explained everything to them, they were shocked by Angelina's behavior and father-in-law's indifference. "Do as you please from now on, Charlotte," they told me. For the first time in a long while, I relaxed and felt at peace. That evening, Mickey came to my parents' house after a long day at work. He had been yelled at by Angelina, who blamed him for everything. Unable to get a straight answer from her, he learned from father-in-law that I had left and came straight to me. "We should have moved out sooner," he said. "I knew my sister and father had been tormenting you, and I'm sorry I couldn't stop it. From now on, I'll always protect you. If you'll still have me, I want you to stay with me as my wife forever." I apologized, saying, "Mickey, I'm sorry for ruining Angelina's engagement. She's your sister, after all." But Mickey hugged me tightly and reassured me, "Charlotte, you did nothing wrong." I stayed with my parents for a while, and Mickey moved my belongings to our new place. Soon after, we found a nice home and started a peaceful life together. Angelina and father-in-law tried calling us every day, but we blocked them. Mickey later told me that Angelina's engagement was called off. Randolph had been so shocked by her behavior that he said, "I need to rethink marriage," and then cut all contact with her. Angelina screamed and cried, blaming Mickey, but he calmly replied, "Charlotte just told the truth." Father-in-law, now desperate without anyone to do the housework, asked Mickey, "Can you bring Charlotte back?" Mickey firmly replied, "I'm cutting ties with this house." A few months later, I found out I was pregnant. Mickey was overjoyed and decided to leave his demanding job for a less stressful one, saying, "I want to raise our child together with you. We haven't told the in-laws about the baby and don't plan to. Their attitudes wouldn't change, so there's no reason to involve them in our happiness." Now, with my belly growing, Mickey and I are looking forward to welcoming our child. We're living peacefully, enjoying each day together.
3 days ago, I celebrated my 15th birthday, but things definitely took an unexpected turn. On the morning of my birthday, my parents came to me, beaming, and announced they had a surprise birthday treat for me, a family trip to a resort. I was thrilled. As the less favored younger sibling, I don't usually get this kind of attention, so I was genuinely happy. However, a couple of hours later, after I had packed my bags and came downstairs ready to leave with my family, I found my parents were already gone. Only my older sister Chloe, 17, was there waiting for me. She is the golden child, the one who can always twist our parents around her little finger. This time was no different. She looked way too pleased with herself, and I instantly knew something was off. When I asked her what was going on, she casually told me I didn't need to pack and could go unpack my bags. At first I thought the trip was canceled altogether, but then she informed me that there would be no family vacation for me. She handed me a piece of paper with a list of chores on it. I was completely bewildered. She then explained that she had discussed it with our parents, and she thought that since my finals were coming up in a couple of weeks, it would be much better for me to stay home and study. Of course, she still got to go because she has already done everything. If I got bored without my family while they were on vacation, I could start on the chores she'd listed. She actually laughed and told me I should be thanking her because she was giving me study time instead of letting me waste time frolicking with my family. I was so hurt and speechless. I could only manage to ask where our parents were. She smugly told me that she had sent them to the airport already and stayed behind just to deliver this birthday gift to me in person. She said my parents wanted to tell me themselves but couldn't bring themselves to. Break my heart. Apparently, Chloe had brought up my finals right after they announced the trip, and they agreed it was for the best. They had Chloe tell me because they were too cowardly to do it themselves, and I knew Chloe was absolutely relishing the chance to humiliate me. I fought back tears in front of her and went back upstairs with my bags. I waited until I heard the front door close, and then I completely broke down and cried for a solid hour. Chloe has always disliked me, and I've always known my parents will do whatever she says without question because, to them, her word is gospel. But I never imagined they would do something so cruel and humiliating to me, especially on my birthday. Chloe and I have had fights before, and my parents always take her side, but this was a new low. That morning, after my parents told me about the surprise trip, I even texted my friends that I couldn't hang out in the evening as planned. Even they were surprised my parents had arranged something like that for me. I guess some things really are too good to be true. I was still furious after I stopped crying. The more I thought about it, the angrier I got. So I decided to do something I knew would infuriate my parents and Chloe to get back at them. Since I was home alone, I went into my dad's office and used the phone to call all the important contacts I found on his laptop. I invited them to a party that evening, saying it was a surprise anniversary party for my parents. I knew it was last minute, but I told everyone I would be really grateful if they could come. Being just a kid, most of his business associates agreed to attend this party I was supposedly throwing. I did the same with my mother's contacts. Neither of them had password protected their devices, making my plan incredibly easy. Then, I texted Chloe's boyfriend on social media and invited him too. I also invited my own friends to help me decorate the house to look like a party was actually happening. Finally, around 7 p.m., the guests I'd invited started arriving. They were really confused to see my parents weren't there. I kept telling them it was a surprise for later. Once all the guests had arrived and I had taken a group photo with everyone, I put my plan into action. I told them exactly where my parents were and explained how I had been treated. I told them how my parents always favored Chloe and treated her word as law, and how I felt like Cinderella, but had never spoken up until now. I recounted the birthday morning fiasco and how my parents had abandoned me without even explaining things in person, all because Chloe thought it was the right thing to do. I could see that many people were genuinely shocked. My parents put on a really good act of being nice and decent people in public, but as I told them, good people don't do this to their own children. After I finished explaining everything, I told them that this was exactly why I had thrown the party, to expose my parents and my sister. To really drive the point home, I even showed them the chore list Chloe had left for me. I noticed Chloe's boyfriend, who was standing in a corner, looking completely stunned, probably realizing his girlfriend had a cruel streak he hadn't seen before. Everyone was silent after I spoke. Eventually, people started to realize there was no point in staying, so some left quietly, and some came up to me to offer a few words of comfort before leaving. The only thing I felt a little bad about was that I had wasted their time, but not really. Once they were all gone, I sent the group photo we'd taken to my parents and sister with the caption, "Had some guests over for my birthday party today? Guess I'll get started on that." Chore list Chloe left me. It was perfect. They responded within seconds, telling me to fix whatever I had done right now, and that they were coming home on the next flight. I immediately blocked all of them and went to my best friend, Maya's house with my bags, because I knew that wasn't my home anymore. Maya and her parents are truly wonderful people who always told me their door was always open for me. I decided to finally take them up on their offer and move in. I didn't know how long they'd be able to support me, but in the meantime, they were all I had, and I am incredibly grateful to them for opening their home so generously. The very next day, on what should have been the continuation of my birthday celebration, my parents came to see me at Maya's house. I guess no one was surprised I had chosen to stay with Maya, because they knew we'd been best friends since we were little. When they arrived, Maya's parents refused to let them in, saying they had no business trying to talk to me when I had made it clear I didn't want to speak to them. My parents started threatening legal action against Maya's parents, and I got a little scared, so I told Maya's parents to let them in, and I would talk to them. They were furious with me and said that no matter what they had done, I had no right to involve their business associates because now their reputation was ruined. None of their colleagues or associates were even willing to speak to them anymore. Some had even blocked my parents' numbers. They were blaming me for all of this, which, I guess, is fair because I did orchestrate the whole thing. But I also told them that if they had just shown me a little kindness and not utterly humiliated me on my birthday, I wouldn't have done any of this. I ended up yelling at them about always treating me badly compared to Chloe, saying that she, along with them, had ruined my life, and I would never forgive them. Things got really heated, and we were all shouting so much that Maya's parents had to step in, and Maya had to take me out of the room to calm me down. When I finally calmed down, her parents came to me and said my parents had left, and that they would make sure they never got to speak to me again until I was ready. Then, they suggested I should seriously consider legal options like living independently because it had become increasingly clear they didn't care about me at all, and it was time I cut them out of my life for good. After discussing it with Maya's parents, I decided to talk to a lawyer, and I started looking into living independently. I'm still very uncertain about it because it's a huge decision, and I don't want to regret anything, but honestly, given how things are going, I don't think I will. The following day, against my wishes, my parents had contacted me again. They sent me an email the previous night. I recognized the address as theirs, so I tried not to open it, but curiosity got the better of me, and I read it. They started by saying the reason they even surprised me with the trip was because one of my father's clients had opened a new spa and resort, and this was a perk for my dad and the family. He just decided to use this opportunity around my birthday. But when Chloe brought up my finals, they didn't want my grades to slip just because I took a vacation a couple of weeks before exams. They said they couldn't believe I had misconstrued this as something negative and tried to get revenge on them for it. It made them feel like they had failed as parents. Chloe, they wrote, was also upset and only wanted to be a good, concerned big sister to me, so there was no need for me to overreact. It was all nonsense, and I almost stopped reading halfway through, but the rest was about how upset they were that I had involved other people in our family drama and aired our dirty laundry in public. They said this was something they never wanted or expected. Regardless of our fights, they claimed I had never come to them directly to tell them about my issues, so they never had a chance to fix things. They said if I had just spoken to them and discussed my feelings, they might have been able to make things right. Instead, I had taken such a drastic step. They conceded that the chore list Chloe left was a tad much. But even then, I should have called them and told them I felt left out, and they would have come back immediately if they knew I was feeling neglected. However, they said the way I chose to handle the situation was unexpected, and they felt bad because they genuinely didn't want to hurt me. And this was just an unfortunate misunderstanding blown out of proportion. They want me to talk to them and sort things out. But I don't know what I want to do right now. I have very mixed feelings. I decided I'm not going to apologize. I blocked the email address they sent that email from, so they can't contact me that way again. I've made up my mind. Whatever they try to say, I'm not going to respond or even read it. It's just not worth it and would only mess with my head more. As for living independently, I've decided to go through with it. It's a huge deal, and I know I'm still young, but Maya and her parents have reassured me that they'll be by my side no matter what, and I have nothing to worry about. They even said they can legally adopt me if that would make me feel less nervous, and I think it might. But I haven't thought about that too much yet. Right now, we're focusing on me living independently. We've spoken to a lawyer, and the paperwork is being processed. I truly don't know how my parents will react to it because, from that email, I could tell they were not happy about me living with Maya and her parents, which doesn't make sense because from how they've treated me my whole life, it's obvious they don't want me that much. At least not as much as they want Chloe around. Yet they're still trying to reach out, which is confusing. I have a feeling they only wanted to get me back to fix their reputation and image, nothing else. I'm just very confused at the moment. Right now, all I can do is wait for them to receive the paperwork and see how they react. It's been a couple of days since my post, and they haven't tried to contact me again after that email, so I don't know what they're feeling. I know things can't be good for them either because there were a lot of people at that party, and I've heard that Chloe and her boyfriend broke up. Nobody knows the reason except me, of course. A couple of days later, my parents were finally served with the legal paperwork for me to live independently, and they were not happy, which was quite surprising to me. They called Maya's parents, and there was a huge fight. Apparently, they believed Maya and her parents had put me up to this and were controlling me. They didn't think I was doing this of my own will, which is ridiculous. Do they even realize how badly they've treated me in the past? Of course, I'm doing this of my own free will. No one had to force me to think twice. I had kind of anticipated this reaction after my last action because they only wanted me back to show everyone we were a happy family. And whatever I said at the party was just me being bratty. But I didn't go back, and that really pissed them off. They can't handle the fact that I'm finally standing up to them. That's too bad, because it's happening. They can call Maya's parents names all they want, but it won't change the fact that they deserve this. They don't deserve to be my parents, and now I'm finally going to be free from them. I couldn't overhear much, but Maya told me my parents had called her parents every name in the book and said they were going to fight them and take this to court if necessary because they had no right to. Put me up to all this nonsense, and they wouldn't tolerate it? They were pretty angry and even threatened to hurt them, which I think is insane. I hope they realize that's illegal and just makes them look worse. The way they spoke about me to Maya's parents just confirmed what I already knew about them. They didn't want me back because they loved me as a daughter, but because they wanted to fix their image. They think Maya's parents are trying to ruin their reputation by acting like my saviors and showing the world I was mistreated at home, which is why I came to them. They are not going to allow it to happen. Apparently they were yelling on the phone about how I was an entitled, spoiled brat, and the fact that Maya's parents were supporting it only meant they were not fit to be parents. I'm pretty sure if they actually loved me like a daughter, they would be more concerned about my well-being and try to talk to me rather than yell at Maya's parents and imply they are trying to ruin my parents' reputation. Maya's parents haven't known my parents for long. They've only known each other through us. There's no reason for them to be competing. It's not like there's any competition anyway, since Maya's parents are much more successful and kinder. But my parents are so obsessed with their image that they think Maya's parents are just like them, incapable of caring about me, and just trying to pull them down. Maya and her parents have strictly told me not to reach out, no matter how tempted I feel, because it's not worth it. I know they recorded the phone call with my parents a couple of days ago. After fighting with them on the phone and only giving me the necessary details, they told me they recorded it and my parents were really stupid because they can use it as evidence for why I deserve to live independently. They also asked me to think about whether I wanted them to legally adopt me or not, and I said yes. Not just to piss off my parents, though that's a bonus, but mostly because I genuinely feel they are kind-hearted and lovely people, and having Maya as my sister will be amazing. I'm all in. They said they'll speak to the lawyer again to start adoption paperwork as well, since it might help with my case to live independently, knowing I have better people to live with and rely on. Honestly, things just keep getting better, and I couldn't be more grateful. However, the good times were abruptly interrupted. Just a short time later, something terrible happened. Long story short, Chloe beat me up after school. My last class, English, was in the East Wing. When I got out, she and a bunch of her friends literally cornered me. I'm unfortunately always the last to leave class because I'm slow at packing up. By the time I left, most people were gone. When I saw Chloe and her friends standing outside, I felt intimidated, but I didn't show it because that's what they wanted. As I left the classroom, they got in my face and said I wasn't allowed to leave. They made everyone else still hanging around leave and told me they had scores to settle. I tried to stay calm and keep my fear hidden, but they didn't care. Chloe grabbed my arm and dragged me outside while I yelled at her to let go. Everyone else was loud too, so nobody heard me. They took me to the janitor's closet, shoved me inside, and locked the door from the outside. I kept banging on the door, but they were standing guard, and even if people heard me, they probably wouldn't dare to do anything because Chloe and her friends are in senior classes and have a nasty reputation. After keeping me locked in for about 5 minutes, Chloe let me out. By then, pretty much everyone in that wing of the school had left. It was just me against them. That's when the first slap landed on my face. She started screaming at me, calling me selfish and ungrateful to our parents. Then, the real reason for her anger came out. She accused me of being the reason her boyfriend broke up with her. Then, she slammed my head against the concrete. I started feeling really dizzy, and she took advantage of it, just kept punching me with her fists while her friends watched and laughed. It was incredibly painful, and I tried to defend myself, but Chloe is several inches taller and much heavier. There wasn't much I could do. At one point, I just cowered against the wall, and she still kept hitting me. Once she was satisfied. She kicked me one last time, and then she and her friends left while I cried against the wall. About 15 minutes later, Maya finally found me sitting on the floor, crying. When I told her what happened, she helped me up. Instead of walking home, we took a cab, because I was in no condition to walk. Once home, we told her parents everything. They looked grim and contacted the school, and then the police immediately. It's only been an hour, and they've been on the phone ever since. They're busy, but Maya is taking care of me. I'm pretty banged up. Bruises are starting to show, and everything hurts, but I know Chloe will get her karma for this, and soon. Thankfully, last week, the school stood up for me and shared security footage from that wing with the police, so it was easy to charge her with misdemeanor. Chloe got community service as punishment, but the best part is she got suspended for 6 weeks. That means she won't be able to go to prom, which she was really looking forward to. She also won't be able to take her finals with her class. She'll have to take them separately, meaning she can't cheat. And in an unexpected turn of events following the whole Chloe debacle, my parents decided to give up their parental rights. Yes, they terminated their parental rights, the paperwork was signed, and everything. I'm finally free, and Maya's parents are in the process of legally adopting me. I couldn't be more grateful to them. My parents said that after everything, they don't want me in their family anymore. I know they'll try to make it seem like I'm the one at fault, but I don't think anyone will believe that. They can try their best. It doesn't matter to me anymore. To be honest, I'm finally part of a happy family now, and I can vouch for the fact that my new sister and parents are going to be far better than the ones I originally had. I really can't believe things are finally working out for me. I'm probably the happiest I've been in a long time. So happy, I actually forgot about my finals coming up. But now, Maya and I are going to buckle down, and we're going to show everyone what I'm capable of. The moment I picked up the velvet box that held the wedding ring, I immediately noticed its lightness and felt something was off. Perhaps deep down, I had a premonition of what was about to unfold. My name is Linda Ford. I am 28 years old and work as an analyst at an investment bank. 5 months ago, my longtime boyfriend, Anthony Reynolds, proposed to me. As our wedding day approached, it had become my daily routine to admire my wedding ring each morning. Anthony's parents, who are well-known tycoons in the finance industry, chose this special ring as a gift for their son's fiancé. The moment I opened the box, my heart nearly stopped. It was empty. The ring that should have been sparkling in the morning light was not there. "Mom," I shouted as I raced down the stairs. "Have you seen my ring? Did you move it?" My mother, who was sipping coffee in the kitchen, slowly looked up. Her fingers, perfectly manicured, were wrapped around her favorite mug. She had always been a perfectionist and had imposed those values on us, her daughters. "What do you mean?" she frowned. "Isn't it in your room?" "You've been so busy with the wedding preparations, maybe you just forgot where you put it." "The box is empty," I said, my hands trembling as I presented the velvet case. "It's always been right here." Without even looking at the box, my mother replied, "You're getting messier, aren't you? With all the wedding stuff on your mind." Just then, I heard my sister Catherine's laughter coming from the backyard. At 23, she had dropped out of university and since then had been leisurely spending her days at home, not working. I looked out the window. There was Catherine, sunbathing and fiddling with her smartphone. "Catherine." I burst out into the backyard. The screen door slammed loudly behind me. "Do you know anything about my ring?" She turned around. "Oh, hey Linda," Catherine said, her face breaking into the smug smile she'd had since we were children. "What's going on? What's the rush? Do you know where my wedding ring is?" "Where?" "I don't know. It's gone. It's nowhere to be found." "Really? Are you sure you checked properly?" "Oh, I remember now. I needed to pay off some debts, so I pawned off your ring to buy one with Michael for ourselves. I got a pretty good price for it. Anthony can buy you a better one." I was stunned by her unexpected confession. Our relationship as sisters had always been like this. Catherine, the youngest, was spoiled by our parents and got whatever she wanted through others. In contrast, as the eldest, I was always held to high standards and had to earn everything through my own efforts. It had been like this since we were little. When Catherine and I made the same mistakes, I was the only one who got scolded. "Because you're the older sister." I despised those words. When Catherine was born, I was 5 years old. Our parents treated her as something special, and I was always relegated to a supporting role. Even if I excelled academically or won awards in extracurricular activities, my parents' attention was always directed towards Catherine. In high school, I consistently maintained top grades. I had a scholarship lined up, and a dream of working in the finance sector was within reach. Meanwhile, Catherine's grades were poor, and she showed no interest in extracurricular activities. Yet our parents continued to say, "She has her own strengths." After starting university on a scholarship, I began an independent life. I worked part-time on weekends and gained internship experience. That's where I met Anthony. He was a junior executive training at his father's company, and he highly valued my analytical skills. Meanwhile, Catherine dropped out of the local university shortly after enrolling. "The university just isn't for me," she said, and started working part-time at a clothing store. As my relationship with Anthony deepened, his family warmly welcomed me. Anthony's mother, especially, trusted me to be a great partner to support her son. The ring Anthony's parents chose for me was also imbued with such sentiments. "Don't say such ridiculous things." I stepped forward and glared at Catherine. "Where is my wedding ring?" "It's a precious ring specially chosen by Anthony's parents." "Give it back to me right now." "I've already sold it, so I don't have it anymore. I'm planning to get married to my handsome boyfriend eventually, so I used it to pay off debts and to fund our own wedding ring." Catherine is currently infatuated with her boyfriend, sparing no expense on beauty treatments and high-end brands to become his ideal woman. Whether it's genuine love or she's just being used is honestly unclear. "Linda, what are you yelling about?" It was my father's voice. He was standing at the back door. Behind him, my mother wore a worried expression. "Catherine stole my wedding ring and sold it without permission," I said. "No, Dad, that's not it." Catherine's lower lip trembled. Her knack for acting hadn't changed since she was a child. My mother stepped forward, placing her hand on my arm. "Catherine is your sister. Why would you say such awful things?" She had her reasons. She was being chased by debt collectors. "So how does that give her the right to steal and sell my wedding ring? Are you serious?" "It's my ring. You think I can just stay quiet after being told she stole and sold it?" I shook off my mother's hand. My voice was trembling with anger. "Just buy a new ring," my father said with exasperation. "That's absurd. That ring is very special, and it's irreplaceable." I stared at my parents. "Besides, this is a crime." My voice echoed through the garden. "Oh, honey," my mother's voice carried that condescending tone I despised. "I understand you're upset. But don't blame Catherine so harshly. Everyone makes mistakes, don't they? Why can't you forgive her just this once?" I looked at the three of them. My mother's disdainful expression, my father's awkward avoidance of eye contact, and Catherine's smug smirk. For 25 years, they had always favored Catherine and protected her. I hadn't expected it to this extent. At that moment, something inside me solidified. A lifetime of patience crystallized into a resolution that settled in my heart. "I understand," I said quietly. "If that's how you feel, I have my own plans. You better get ready." I heard my parents calling my name from behind, but I didn't look back as I entered the house. They had no idea what was about to happen. I quickly packed the essentials and headed to my best friend Maggie's apartment. I spent the night at Maggie's place. Maggie and I met in a bookkeeping club at university. She's a sharp-witted and outspoken woman, a skilled trader working on Wall Street. Though our personalities are opposites, we complement each other perfectly. How did it come to this? Maggie handed me a glass of wine as we looked out over the Manhattan skyline from her apartment. "I don't know." I took the trembling glass of wine. "Why does it have to be like this, even though we're family?" "Linda." Maggie looked into my eyes with a serious expression. "You've always sacrificed yourself for your family. But this situation cannot be overlooked. This isn't just a sibling fight. It's a serious crime." Maggie began to calmly analyze the situation. "First, let's get the facts straight. This is a clear case of theft. The ring was bought by Anthony's parents. That means the Reynolds family's reputation is also involved." "Yes, but what should I do?" "It's necessary to set things right because we're family." Maggie gripped my hand firmly. "If you overlook this incident, Catherine will repeat the same behavior. That benefits no one." We talked until late into the night. Maggie not only explained the legal aspects in detail but also patiently listened to my emotional venting. "Do you remember? In university, you covered for my investment mistake." Maggie reminisced. "You scolded me harshly then, but afterwards you helped me find a solution. It's the same with this situation with Catherine. Sometimes tough love is necessary." Maggie's words gradually cleared my doubts. Her presence was a great support during this difficult time. "Hey," Maggie said as she topped up our wine, "don't you think this situation has revealed your parents' true nature? They've coddled Catherine and placed excessive expectations on you. Is that really love?" Those words articulated a question that had long lingered in my heart. Maggie has always provided me with perspectives I hadn't noticed. However, Anthony's parents are different. Maggie continued. "They recognize and trust your worth. You must address this situation properly so as to not betray that trust." Maggie's advice was always spot on. It was because of her presence that I was able to make the right decisions. The next morning, I drove back to my parents' house with a clear purpose. Everyone was gathered in the kitchen, as if nothing had happened. "Oh, good," my mother said as she slid a plate of pancakes onto the counter. "Linda, we were worried about you." Seeing that I remained standing, it was clear they expected me to have calmed down and to handle things smoothly, as usual. Catherine was sitting at the table. Just as I frowned, my father started, "Dear Linda, We've been discussing and thinking. No, I interrupted him. You don't need to think about anything. That ring is mine, and Catherine stole it and then sold it. She needs to return it to me immediately. Actually, my mother straightened up. We'll buy you a new ring. A better one. That way everyone can be happy, right? I stared at her in disbelief. Everyone can be happy? My sister stole my precious ring from me, and you're okay with that? It's not like that. But you're the older sister, right? Can't you forgive a small mistake? My heart pounded fiercely. I slowly took out my smartphone. It was on speaker mode and a call was active. Mr. Ford, what exactly is going on? A male voice came through the phone. Is that James Reynolds? My parents looked shocked, as if the blood had drained from their faces. The caller was Anthony's father, James Reynolds. He's a businessman with over 30 years of experience. He owns multiple companies and his wealth is immense. Before returning home, I had consulted him over the phone and secretly slipped the still active smartphone into my pocket on speaker mode. I continued speaking while maintaining eye contact with Catherine. I'm sorry to disturb you, Mr. Reynolds. Could you please explain the situation? Yes. As you've just heard, my sister stole the wedding ring you bought for me and sold it to pay off her debts. I kept the phone on speaker mode, still looking directly at Catherine. Please continue. When my parents learned the truth, they reproached me, arguing that everyone makes mistakes. Why can't you forgive just one mistake? They asked. They seemed sweaty and panicked. I see. The situation seems more serious than I thought. Mr. Reynolds, my mother managed to say, we're really sorry to Linda. But Catherine was in a tough situation. It was a hard decision for her. We will buy Linda a new ring ourselves. Catherine then added, Mr. Reynolds, I'm really sorry, but Linda has a perfect job and a perfect life. She can get another ring. That's unacceptable. That's enough. James' voice was calm, but there was a hint of anger in it. The next day, our family sat in the Reynolds' study, facing Anthony's parents. Anthony, having heard the situation from me, was also present. The Reynolds' study was filled with solid furniture and historic paintings. James Reynolds, a wealthy businessman with over 30 years on Wall Street, was visibly angry. The ring we bought for Linda isn't just any piece of jewelry. His voice was low yet forceful. Elizabeth, Anthony's mother, said tearfully, that ring was specially chosen as a symbol of welcoming Linda into our family. It represents our feelings. Seeing the expressions of my parents and Catherine, it seemed they finally realized the gravity of what they had done. Catherine's face was pale, and she couldn't raise her head. I'm sorry. My daughter has done something terrible. My father said those words with all the effort he could muster. Tears filled my mother's eyes as she repeatedly apologized, desperate and shaken. The study was dominated by a heavy, oppressive atmosphere. Amidst this tension, Anthony stood up decisively. He stood next to his father, James, and promised, I will find it and get it back. Anthony himself was a businessman who had successfully led an investment company at a young age. His determination to protect his family's honor was evident in his eyes. Check every pawnshop, Anthony's father commanded. Don't worry about the costs. It's for the family's honor. The next few days began with us going on a journey from Manhattan to Brooklyn, visiting each pawnshop one by one. From high-end stores to small shops, I continued to show photos. Have you seen a ring like this? Has a young woman brought in a ring with these features? On the third day, an elderly shop owner in Brooklyn showed us his shop's surveillance footage. This woman brought it in a few days ago. The footage clearly showed Catherine. She had sold the ring and received a substantial amount of cash. It hasn't been cashed out yet, so it should still be in the store, the shopkeeper explained, retrieving the ring from the back. From the woman's uneasy demeanor, I sensed something was off. I'm glad I held off on cashing it. Anthony immediately verified the ring. It's undeniable. This is it. Thank goodness. I'm so relieved. Overwhelmed with relief, I couldn't help but cry. We've successfully retrieved the ring. I don't even know how to thank you enough, I said gratefully. With the ring in hand, I went to the Reynolds' house and presented it to Anthony's parents. His mother silently hugged me, while his father sighed deeply in relief. We will handle this matter, including taking legal steps, his father stated firmly. Linda, you are a member of our family. Compromise is not an option when it comes to protecting our honor. I nodded in agreement. Through this experience, I felt even more strongly the deep love embedded within their sternness. For them, the ring was not just an ornament, but a symbol of family bonds and trust. We began the process of filing a criminal complaint at the police station. While drafting the report on Catherine's theft, the detective reviewed the surveillance footage. There is clear evidence here, the detective noted. The pawnshop transaction footage is undeniable, and we've identified the ring. My parents rushed to the police station. My mother broke down crying, and my father looked pale as death. Please, drop the charges, my mother pleaded. It's too late, I said to them quietly. This is a crime. 2 days later, Catherine was released. A meeting with lawyers was arranged, and both families discussed the matter. The expressions on my parents' and Catherine's faces were more serious than I had ever seen. We were wrong, my father admitted quietly. I shifted my gaze from my father to Catherine and suggested, let's discuss and explore a way to settle this. The terms of the settlement we proposed were clear. Catherine would fully repay the amount used to buy back the ring, and she would cease all contact with me and my family. Eventually, my parents accepted these terms and Catherine agreed as well. After a heavy silence, my father spoke. We accept. This was a failure in our upbringing, he acknowledged. My mother, tears brimming in her eyes, nodded. Linda, we have hurt you for years. I'm truly sorry, she said. Her hand trembled slightly as she signed the settlement document. This marked the beginning of a new chapter for our family. Catherine, tell me one thing. How did it come to this? Because you were perfect. Catherine answered with a bitter expression. You could do everything, and you were excellent. In contrast, I always felt inferior. I wanted to affirm my worth by depending on Mom and Dad, but I leaned on them too much. I desperately needed money. The debt collectors were after me every day. Hearing this, I felt a mix of complex emotions. Indeed, I had always tried to be the good child. I strove to meet my parents' expectations and achieve societal success. But was that truly the life I wanted? When the settlement was finalized and I decided to cut off contact with Catherine, a profound emptiness spread within me. Can the bonds of family really be severed so easily? Afterward, my parents resolved to encourage Catherine to become independent, pushing her to live on her own. She is currently looking for an apartment in preparation for this new chapter. Months later, just 1 week before my wedding to Anthony, my mother unexpectedly visited my apartment. Linda, can we talk for a moment, she asked, her usual assertive tone replaced by a more subdued demeanor. I've been thinking a lot about Catherine, she began quietly. We've indulged her too much, always accepting her excuses and never holding her accountable. And with you, we've been too harsh and unfair on you. Mom, we made a significant mistake with the ring incident. Trying to cover up our daughter's crime was the lowest act as parents, she admitted, tears glistening in her eyes. But you did the right thing. Taking legal action made Catherine face reality, which ultimately benefited her. That evening, I received a call from my father. Linda, may I attend the wedding? His voice was unusually hesitant. Our relationship had been awkward since the ring incident. Yes, Dad. Anthony would be happy for you to come, too, I replied. Thank you, he paused before continuing. I've been taking dance lessons. I don't want to ruin the father-daughter dance. His words made me smile involuntarily. Imagining my always dignified father learning to dance for me warmed my heart. My decision to forgive my parents was influenced by their sincere efforts. Catherine had received $20,000 from the pawn shop. To make amends, my parents decided to use part of their retirement funds to repay this amount. "This is also our way of making amends for everything else we've done wrongly to you," my father had said. The repayment from Catherine was proceeding smoothly. My father checked the payments at the bank every month, his sense of responsibility to the family evident. Anthony's parents, without ever mentioning the incident with the ring, wholeheartedly celebrated our new beginning. His mother, especially, meticulously helped with everything from choosing the dress to decorating the venue. "You are our pride," she told me on the final fitting day. "I know you will make Anthony happy. But more importantly, I want you to cherish your own happiness," she said, a sentiment no one had ever expressed to me before. My own happiness. What was that exactly? On the morning of the wedding, I greeted the day with a surprisingly calm spirit. While the makeup artist applied the final touches, I studied my reflection in the mirror. Linda, a knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. It was my mother. "Come in," I invited her. She teared up seeing me in my white dress. "You look perfect," she murmured. "Mom, look at this," I said, picking up an envelope from the dresser. "It's a letter from Catherine." Since the incident, I hadn't seen Catherine, adhering to the terms of our settlement, which also included no contact. Occasionally, I felt a pang of loneliness, a contradiction I was fully aware of. Despite the years of distress caused by her actions and the unjust treatment by our parents, recalling Catherine's words of anguish that day stirred complex emotions within me. "Have you opened it?" my mother asked softly. "Not yet," I replied, caressing the envelope gently. "But I don't think I need to open it now." Instead, I stood up and took her hand. "Today is a day for new beginnings. Let's leave the past behind and look forward." She nodded silently and embraced me. In the chapel, Anthony awaited me with a gentle smile. My father, nervous yet composed, took my arm and we began walking down the aisle. "Don't be nervous, Dad," I whispered softly. "Show me the results of those lessons," I teased. My father gave a small smile. As we exchanged vows and rings, a moment of hesitation appeared when Anthony slipped the ring onto my finger. But as his warm hand enveloped mine and the ring settled quietly, it felt as if everything returned to its rightful place. During the father-daughter dance at the reception, my father led me with slightly awkward, yet earnest steps. "Linda," he whispered as the song was ending. "Thank you." "For what?" "For teaching me to live strongly and honestly." That night, after the party ended and I was alone in my hotel room, I finally opened Catherine's letter. "To my big sister. I won't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve to. But I needed to tell you that your decision was right. When you said you would press charges, I was filled with anger and resentment. But now I understand. It was the wake-up call I needed. I'm currently in counseling. I've also started repaying my debts. For the first time, I'm trying to solve my problems on my own, without relying on our parents. This might be the first time I'm truly taking responsibility for my actions. I hope you find happiness. I truly wish that for you. From the bottom of my heart, Catherine." A new chapter for our family was about to begin. By the way, it seems Catherine has broken up with that boyfriend. I think it's for the best. Sometimes the deepest wounds give rise to the most beautiful lessons. And sometimes, to reclaim what was lost, you have to let go of everything. That was the true brilliance I learned from the ring. I am Samantha, a 35-year-old woman. I am blissfully married to my beloved husband, Douglas, and together we share a serene and delightful life with our 7-year-old son, Joseph, and our 4-year-old daughter, Christina. Douglas and I first met in the university cafeteria during our college days. Each of us was enjoying a cup of coffee with a book in hand, when a spontaneous conversation sparked a deep and meaningful connection. Douglas, ever so calm and considerate, would attentively listen to my tales with a gentle patience that felt comforting. Over time, our friendship blossomed and evolved, and I came to realize that his presence in my life had become absolutely irreplaceable. His marriage proposal was beautifully simple. Beneath a canopy of beautifully blossoming trees, he shyly presented a ring and lovingly declared, "I want to be with you forever." His sincere words were all I needed to instantly agree with a nod, filled with deep emotion. Since that momentous day when we exchanged vows, we have found true happiness in our marriage. When our son Joseph was born, Douglas, with tears of joy cascading down his cheeks, tenderly murmured, "He's our treasure." Joseph is a vivacious and inquisitively spirited child who thrives outdoors. Every weekend, we embark on delightful family picnics, and observing him energetically run around fills my heart with an immense sense of joy and fulfillment. Soon after, we welcomed Christina into our lives. She was a bit delicate, diagnosed with a congenital condition from birth. Initially, our concerns were significant, but Douglas and I joined forces and committed to support her at every challenging step. Joseph, her protective older brother, cherishes his sister deeply and often says, "I will protect Christina." Witnessing their growth and bond develop has been the pinnacle of my joy. Another individual holds an extraordinarily special place in my heart, my grandmother, Helen. She is the epitome of grace and warmth, qualities I have admired and loved since my childhood. My mother, Kathy, divorced my father when I was quite young and swiftly remarried a man named Michael, with whom she had my half-sister, Ashley. As my mother immersed herself in her new family, I gradually felt that I was becoming an afterthought. While my mother and stepfather lavished Ashley with love and attention, I often felt overlooked and neglected. During family shopping trips, Ashley would frequently receive new shoes, whereas I was reminded, "The ones you have are still perfectly fine." However, my grandmother Helen always treated me differently. She would envelop me in her warm embraces and reassuringly say, "Samantha, you are my precious granddaughter." Whenever loneliness crept in, I found solace and comfort at her welcoming home. The affection I yearned for from my mother was seldom received, making my grandmother's presence a sanctuary for my heart. On significant occasions like my wedding and the births of my children, my parents and stepsister displayed minimal interest in my life. My wedding seemed more of a duty for my mother and Michael than a celebration. They attended out of obligation, rather than genuine desire to participate. My mother offered no comments on my wedding arrangements or my choice of dress, leaving me feeling as if my dreams and aspirations were dissolving into thin air, resulting in a lingering emptiness after the ceremony. When Joseph was born, my mother prioritized Ashley, bringing her to the hospital immediately after I gave birth. Yet her interest in my newborn was notably scant. Ashley's inquiries about the baby seemed driven by mere curiosity, her gaze detached and indifferent. I desperately longed for my mother to genuinely see and love my child, yet her focus remained fixed on Ashley, which rendered me feeling incredibly isolated and lonely within my own family. My mother, Ashley, and Michael appeared to form an impenetrable unit, leaving me feeling like an outsider, despite my deep affection and support for them. Coming to terms with this reality was challenging for me. I reflected on this situation repeatedly but could never fully reconcile these feelings. Eventually, I began to distance myself and view my familial relationships from a broader perspective. Nevertheless, my grandmother Helen was thrilled when I informed her of my decision to marry. When I shared the news, she wept tears of joy and exclaimed, "Congratulations, you made a wonderful choice." Her heartfelt words warmed me to my core and nearly brought me to tears myself. Helen sincerely wished for my happiness, which moved me and imprinted her kindness onto my soul. When I introduced Douglas to her for the first time, she greeted him warmly. Sensing his slight nervousness, she grasped his hand firmly and repeatedly urged him, "Please take good care of Samantha." "I'm counting on you." Douglas, touched by her words, responded with a shy smile and expressed his profound gratitude. At that moment, I felt just how much my grandmother cherished me and the immense trust she placed in Douglas. When Joseph and Christina were born, her joy was boundless, far exceeding all my expectations. She adored our children profoundly. When Joseph took his first steps, Helen, with tears of happiness streaming down her face, jubilantly exclaimed, "Look, he can walk now." Whenever Christina offered a smile, Helen was utterly enchanted, often remarking joyfully, "Christina is starting to look like her mama." For my children, Helen was not merely a great-grandmother, she was a boundless source of unconditional love. For me, her enduring warmth and affection have been a foundational pillar of support, providing me with strength and courage through all of life's challenges. Helen harbored a deep love for Hawaii, and her home was adorned with vibrant Hawaiian paintings and ornaments which infused every room with a peaceful, tropical ambience. After the early loss of my grandfather, she chose to live independently, cherishing the memories they shared. In honor of their cherished past, she utilized the inheritance to purchase a cottage in Hawaii, a place imbued with their treasured memories which held special significance to her. The charming cottage stood majestically along the pristine beachfront, serving as a haven of peace and tranquility with each visit. After marrying, I frequently brought my family to stay at the cottage, alongside my beloved grandmother Helen. Known for her culinary prowess, Helen's lemon pie was particularly exceptional, its flavor unrivaled. Standing by her side in the kitchen, enveloped in the delightful aromas of sugar and butter, remains one of my most cherished memories. Douglas was equally enchanted by the serene ambience, often commenting with a contented smile, "This place is like heaven." Joseph joyfully sprinted along the sandy shores, while Christina adored sitting on Helen's lap, captivated by her enthralling stories. Helen's profound affection for my family was unmistakable. When she confided in me, "I plan to leave this cottage to you," my heart swelled with joy. The cottage was a repository of precious memories, and I envisioned creating similarly warm memories for my children. However, these blissful days were overshadowed when Helen fell gravely ill. I devoted myself to caring for her, but managing Christina's health complexities simultaneously proved to be a formidable challenge. Unbeknownst to me during this tumultuous period, my mother Kathy and stepfather Michael feigned concern for Helen while covertly plotting to claim her estate. The depth of my grief was profound when Helen passed away, but the revelation in her will shocked me even more. Helen had bequeathed not only the Hawaiian cottage, but also a substantial sum of money to me. Upon discovering this, tears streamed down my face uncontrollably. It felt as though I could hear Helen's voice gently saying, "Samantha, the cottage and everything else are for you and your family." However, my mother and stepfather vehemently disagreed. They argued that it was unjust for me to inherit everything and strongly suggested that I transfer ownership of the cottage to Helen's brother, Thomas. I wanted to say no, but at that time, I was physically and mentally exhausted from caring for Christina and her medical expenses. I didn't have the energy to argue. Reluctantly, I succumbed to their pressure and handed the keys to Thomas, stating calmly, "We'll handle the paperwork when things settle down." The loss of Helen's cherished cottage was painful, yet I compelled myself to focus solely on Christina. After all, with my husband and children by my side, I felt I had sufficient joy in my life. Several weeks following Helen's passing, an unexpected disaster struck. Although there had been reports of an approaching hurricane days prior, the sheer magnitude of devastation it brought to our region was unforeseen. The storm's ferocity surpassed all expectations, engulfing the town in torrential rains and widespread flooding. On that fateful day, I remained home with Christina, whose frailty made her particularly vulnerable to the abrupt weather changes. So we stayed indoors to monitor the evolving situation. Meanwhile, Douglas and Joseph ventured to a nearby supermarket to procure supplies. Despite the streets beginning to flood, Douglas assured with a lighthearted, "We'll be back soon," while Joseph cheerfully promised, "I'll buy some snacks Christina likes," as they waved goodbye. Little did I know, those would be their final words. On their way back, they tried to cross a flooded road. At that moment, a surge of water swept their car away. When I heard about the accident on the news, I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. I couldn't believe it, or perhaps I didn't want to believe it. In a state of panic, I rushed to the police station, frantically pleading for them to find Douglas and Joseph. However, after agonizing hours, a police officer solemnly shook his head and whispered, "I'm sorry." Douglas and Joseph were tragically lost to the floodwaters. My world shattered in an instant. Consumed by grief so intense it felt suffocating, I wept inconsolably. Christina was crying too, but I told myself I had to stay composed for her. Yet the depth of my loss felt immeasurable. There was much to be done, such as arranging the funeral. I set the date, contacted family and friends, and began preparing to say goodbye to Douglas and Joseph. Amidst this, I also informed my mother of the tragedy. Over the phone, after a moment of silence, she responded indifferently, "That's unfortunate." "When is the funeral?" she asked. "Next Saturday," I replied. "I can't make it," she said. "Why?" "I have plans to go to Hawaii." "You know Ashley recently lost her job and broke up with her boyfriend, right? So Michael and I planned a trip to cheer her up. It's been scheduled for a while, and it's difficult to cancel now." Her words were incomprehensible to me. Prioritizing a vacation over mourning the loss of her son-in-law and grandson? "Mom, are you serious?" I asked in a trembling voice. "Samantha, we can't just change our plans. Ashley is looking forward to this. Family died. Douglas and Joseph. And you're prioritizing a trip? Don't overreact, Samantha. I understand how you feel, but we have our plans." Speechless and heartbroken, I realized she had chosen a Hawaiian vacation for Ashley over attending the funeral of her son-in-law and grandson. Mixed with anger and profound sorrow, I ended the phone call, feeling a deep sense of betrayal and isolation. I was in disbelief. My mother had always shown a preference for Ashley over me, yet I had never imagined she could be so utterly heartless. On the somber day of the funeral, as I tried valiantly to suppress my tears, I tenderly placed Douglas and Joseph's favorite flowers atop their caskets, offering a silent, poignant farewell. The ceremony saw a considerable turnout, including many friends and relatives of Douglas, which provided a small comfort. Remarkably, even my estranged father and his side of the family, whom I had not seen for many years, made the effort to attend. Their presence and shared expressions of grief brought a slight solace amidst the overwhelming sorrow. In stark contrast, my mother, stepfather, and stepsister were conspicuously absent. They were already at the airport. I knew it instinctively. The image of them waiting in the airport lobby, laughing carelessly as they anticipated their flight, ignited a fury within me that was hard to contain. Such callousness was simply unforgivable. Engulfed in grief over the loss of my husband and son, I also felt a simmering anger toward them brewing quietly within me. Following the funeral, I decided to check the security cameras installed at the Hawaiian cottage. Seeing them arrive there casually, as if nothing had happened, solidified my resolve. I was determined not to let them get away with their indifference. I promptly called the police and reported them for trespassing, leading to their eviction from the cottage. When the police arrived and escorted them out, they were utterly bewildered. Frantically, they claimed that the cottage was supposed to belong to my grandmother's brother, Thomas, but their claims fell on deaf ears. The officers, having been informed by me that I was the legal owner and had not authorized their stay, shared this with my family, who were visibly shocked and confused. They had no choice but to find temporary accommodation in a nearby hotel. Shortly after the eviction, my mother called me in a rage. "What have you done, Samantha? Why would you do such a thing?" Her voice was thick with anger, and for a moment I was left speechless by her audacity. I was momentarily speechless, thinking, again, she only thinks of herself. I don't understand why this would be considered trespassing. We're family. It shouldn't be a problem for us to visit. She continued vehemently. I can't believe you would do such a thing. That cottage is supposed to belong to Thomas, isn't it? My heart grew even colder. In her words, I felt the overlap of my past pain and betrayal. She continued to assert her rights without acknowledging their wrongdoing. The last vestiges of warmth in my heart slowly solidified into ice. Mom, please calm down and listen, I said calmly. When you entered that cottage, I hadn't yet completed the legal paperwork. That means the cottage was still legally mine. I didn't know that. It's unbelievable that you would accuse your own family of trespassing. Do you know how much the hotel cost? Her voice was still full of anger. How could you do this? We're family. Despite her escalating anger, I held my ground. If we truly were family, then attending your son-in-law and grandson's funeral should have been your priority. I don't consider people who skip such a crucial family event as part of my family. This left her momentarily at a loss for words, but I seized the opportunity to express all the frustration and anger I had been holding back. I no longer consider you family, I declared firmly, and ended the call. In the aftermath, I learned that my mother, stepfather, and stepsister cut their trip short and returned home earlier than intended. They had probably planned to stay at the cottage for several days, but now faced unexpected financial burdens due to the situation. Naturally, it seemed fitting that they experienced some financial difficulties. Despite their return, my mother continued to aggressively blame me for the situation. Regardless of her indifference and betrayal, she insisted on portraying me as the one at fault. You really did something terrible by betraying your own family, she repeatedly messaged me. I chose to ignore her messages, and over time, her words lost any impact on me. My heart had completely cooled towards them. Douglas had always been the primary breadwinner, providing a stable and comfortable lifestyle for our family. Over the years, I had consistently sent financial support to my parents, especially since my mother frequently requested assistance, and my stepfather often demanded financial help. Deep down, I never felt obligated to send them money. It was more about the expectation that I should support them. But after the loss of Douglas and Joseph, and particularly with my mother's glaring absence at the funeral, my resentment towards her reached its peak. Her decision to prioritize a leisure trip to Hawaii over mourning with her family was an unforgivable betrayal that left my heart ice cold. As a result, I decided to cease all financial support to them. The following month, when my mother realized the financial support had stopped, she called me in a panic. Every time the phone rang, a wave of disturbance washed over me, but I managed to maintain my composure. Why haven't you sent the money? What do you mean by this? She demanded over the phone. With a deep, steadying breath, I responded quietly but firmly. I will no longer be sending you any financial support. After a stunned silence, my mother objected vehemently. Why would you do this? You know we rely on your support. How are we supposed to live if you don't help us? Her voice was filled with desperation and anger. At that moment, I realized I had fully come to terms with my decision. No matter how upset she became, I would not be swayed. I have no intention of continuing to send money anymore. You didn't even attend the funeral. I see no reason to continue supporting people who chose to go on vacation in Hawaii rather than mourn the loss of my husband and son, I replied coldly. My mother's fury intensified at my words. You're such a cold child. To say such heartless things without any regard for me, she exclaimed. But I was no longer affected by her words. That's fine. I don't think there's anything more to discuss, I concluded, and hung up the phone for the last time. After ending the call, I reaffirmed my decision to have nothing more to do with these people. Afterwards, my mother and stepfather, who had been living off my support and their pensions, had to manage on just their pensions. According to relatives, Ashley, who had been fired from her job, had not found new employment and was still living at home. Their household finances were strained, even making it difficult to pay for utilities. The family that used to dine out frequently was now limited to frugal meals. My mother picked out discounted groceries with a sigh, and my stepfather struggled to find work, hindered by his age. The former liveliness was gone, replaced by a heavy silence that likely hung over their home. However, I felt no sympathy for them. I no longer felt obliged to solve their hardships. Protecting my own peace of mind was my top priority. From there, my mother and stepfather's behavior became increasingly desperate. They started showing up at my house unannounced, begging for money, and when refused, they would shout and wreak havoc. Fearing their unpredictable visits, I doubled the locks on my doors and installed security cameras. Each ring of the doorbell put me on edge, and I often pretended not to be home. I couldn't feel safe in my own house, becoming sensitive to every noise at night, which led to many sleepless nights. One day, when my mother tried to sneak into my house again, I immediately called the police. Upon their arrival, she was arrested on the spot, and the incident resulted in a criminal record for her. My mother and stepfather lost social credibility, struggled to find work due to their criminal records, and were unable to receive loans from banks. With no income, their financial difficulties worsened. Despite the severity of their ordeal, I could not find it in myself to sympathize. My heart had closed off to them. All I could do was quietly watch their betrayal. The fact that my mother and stepfather had skipped my husband and son's funeral to go on a trip to Hawaii became a major topic among relatives and was met with widespread criticism. They became distanced and isolated from everyone around them. Criticism towards her increased, and she lost support from family and friends, finding herself without anyone to rely on. Despite repeated apologies from my mother, my heart remained cold. I had no intention of accepting her apologies. I decided to look forward without dwelling on how much I had been hurt and vowed not to sacrifice myself to meet familial expectations anymore. Above all, I had something precious to protect Christina. Knowing her strength, I had to live strongly for her sake. To do this, cutting ties with my family and stopping any further financial support felt like the best course of action. With a resolve to not be bound by the past, I decided to completely separate myself from my family. Connections with my mother, stepfather, and stepsister had become meaningless to me. In my heart, my relationship with them had completely ended. I stopped all financial support and felt the weight of how much I had been compromising. From that day, I chose to proceed on my own, without relying on anyone. Christina and I moved to the Hawaiian cottage. In a room filled with warm sunlight and views of the tranquil sea, we started our new life. Christina gradually regained her strength, and as I supported her, I found new hope within myself. Now free from my family and past pains, I felt liberated. Despite the tears I had shed looking back, those tears were now for moving beyond my past, not returning to it. Sometimes, as Christina and I walked along the beach, I thought about how our difficult journey had shaped us. It made me appreciate our new life all the more. Christina, slowly reclaiming her smile, seemed to be overcoming something within herself. Since I made the decision to live strongly, our lives gradually became more peaceful, and I felt a new future unfolding for us. The end of my relationship with my family allowed me to reclaim myself. I deepened my bond with Christina and began to enjoy life again. Those moments made me truly glad I had cut ties with my family, and I looked forward to a future of freedom and renewal. Proud of being able to live looking forward, I decided to tread each step of my life firmly. It happened in the spring when I was 10 years old. It was a day our family would never forget. My father was making his special pancakes on a Sunday morning. The sweet, fragrant aroma wafted from the kitchen, while the sound of my mother humming as she set the table created a comforting background melody. My father had a knack for making pancakes shaped like bears and stars to make me laugh. Sunday mornings spent together were the epitome of our family routine. That morning, my father was his usual cheerful self, waving the frying pan like a magic wand. "Princess Jean, your special pancakes are ready," he said playfully. Leaving my favorite bunny plushie on the sofa, I eagerly ran to the kitchen. Little did I know that the event that followed would change our family forever. Suddenly, my father clutched his chest, and the spatula clattered noisily to the floor. At that moment, it felt as though time had stopped. I saw my father's face contort in pain, and he let out a soundless scream. My mother, though shaken, quickly grabbed the phone to call an ambulance, but I could only stand there frozen. I remember blankly watching as the ambulance arrived and took my father away. The sound of the siren echoed in the air. In the hospital's white corridor, I vividly recall seeing my mother collapse into tears. That day, my father passed away due to a heart attack. It was so sudden that we had no time to prepare. After my father was gone, the house was enveloped in an empty silence. The laughter and sweet smell of pancakes that once filled our home were replaced by a lifeless void. My mother tried to support me despite her grief, but she was also consumed by a profound sense of loss. About a year after my father's death, my mother met Solomon, her new partner. Solomon was tall and had kind, gentle eyes. He became a comforting presence, slowly filling the void in our hearts. They met through a support group for widows, and he exuded a reassuring warmth that reminded us of my father. When Solomon started visiting our home, the atmosphere began to change little by little. He helped me with my math homework and listened when I had a bad day at school. Even so, it took time for him to be accepted as part of our family. Eventually, my mother decided to remarry, and Solomon moved in with us a few months later. Around the time Solomon became a part of our family, we were blessed with a new life. I still clearly remember the day my mother told me, "You're going to be a big sister." Her eyes sparkled with excitement, but my heart was filled with mixed emotions. As our family took on a new form, the days when my father was with us felt increasingly distant. When my little sister was born, my mother's attention turned entirely to that tiny new presence. She decided to quit her job and devote herself to caring for my sister. "This early childhood period is so crucial for a child's development," she often said. But to me, those words felt like an announcement that I was no longer a priority in our family. As my mother became immersed in taking care of my sister, my daily life gradually changed. I came home from school to find no lunch prepared, and when I spoke to my mother, her ears were tuned only to my sister's cries. At the dinner table, my mother often ate while holding my sister, and I felt as though I wasn't even there. "Jean, do you know? Sometimes people become so absorbed in one thing that they forget about everything else," Solomon told me after dinner one evening. His words gave me a small sense of relief, but it didn't change the fact that my place in the family still felt unstable. Thus, our family, having lost my father, spent each day grappling with loneliness and inner conflicts as we tried to find a new form of togetherness. With Solomon becoming part of the family and the birth of my sister, our household took on a new shape. However, this change was not necessarily comfortable for me. My mother devoted herself entirely to caring for my sister, and her attention toward me gradually faded. It felt as though I had become an unimportant member of the family. Solomon tried hard to maintain balance in the household. He would take me to the park on weekends and attend school events. Even so, every time I saw my mother so engrossed with my sister, I felt a small seed of loneliness take root in my heart. That seed grew steadily over time. My mother often said, "This time is so important for her future." While I knew she wasn't lying, the phrase "for her future" felt like a denial of my present. One evening, Solomon knocked on my door and quietly spoke to me. Jean, I understand that you feel like you're not being cared for, but you are important. Please don't forget that." His words felt like a lifeline to me. Still, every time I saw the unshakable bond between my mother and sister, I felt as though I was losing my place within the family. While Solomon tried to be there for me, my mother's unwavering focus on my sister left the atmosphere at home somewhat strained. A growing gap slowly formed between my mother and me. I still remember the day my sister first said, "Mama." The moment my mother heard it, she beamed with tears of joy and hugged my sister tightly. Watching that scene, I was overcome with a strange mix of happiness and sadness. It felt like I was part of the family, yet somehow observing it from the outside. As I watched my mother's love for my sister deepen day by day, I began to feel as though I was being pushed further away from the heart of the family. That sense of loneliness started to take root in my heart during this time. As my sister grew, my mother's expectations for her only grew larger. She became busy enrolling my sister in music and art classes, and our family's days revolved around those schedules. My mother's voice was always gentle when she spoke to my sister, and she celebrated even her smallest successes with exaggerated joy. In contrast, whenever I shared my achievements at school or in club activities, my mother would simply respond, "That's nice," before quickly shifting the conversation back to my sister. Even in such circumstances, Solomon always remained on my side. He listened to me attentively and sometimes encouraged me by saying, "You're really putting in a lot of effort." I can't express how much those words saved me. Without him, I might have been completely crushed by the loneliness I felt within the family. However, despite Solomon's efforts, the distance between my mother and me only grew wider. I felt as though my sister was the center of the family, while I was merely a satellite orbiting around her. This feeling became increasingly vivid as I grew older. On the surface, our family appeared peaceful, but inside me, small frustrations accumulated and gradually turned into a deep sense of loneliness. At the same time, tension began to arise between Solomon and my mother. Solomon tried to maintain fairness within the family, but he too started questioning my mother's excessive attention toward my sister. One evening during dinner, my sister pushed her plate away, refusing to eat. My mother sat beside her, patiently trying to persuade her, saying, "Just one more bite." Watching this, Solomon put down his fork and said, "Sally, you need to let her become more independent. You can't do everything for her." My mother's face immediately stiffened as she replied, "Are you saying I'm a bad mother?" Solomon responded calmly, "That's not what I'm saying. But she's not the only child in this family. Jean is your daughter too." However, it seemed those words didn't reach my mother. She retorted firmly, "She's still so young. She needs special care." The situation settled down somehow, but Solomon's words left a deep impression on me. Day by day, Solomon continued to try to support me. One day, he suggested that I join a karate class. I accepted his suggestion, and Solomon drove me to and from the class several times a week. The conversations we had on the way home after practice became a source of comfort for me. When I earned a belt during a match, I still remember how he cheered louder than any other parent. While I grew through my time with Solomon, the tension at home continued to escalate. Solomon suggested to my mother that she reduce her dependency on my sister, but instead of listening, my mother became increasingly defensive. When my sister expressed interest in trying Little League, Solomon said, "This could be a great opportunity." However, my mother immediately dismissed the idea. "Baseball is too dangerous. It's safer for her to attend art classes instead," she insisted, leaving Solomon speechless. Even in the art class chosen for my sister, she showed little enthusiasm and stopped attending after the third session. When my mother found out, she only blamed the teacher, saying, "The teacher doesn't understand children's creativity." This kind of attitude from my mother seemed to distort everything within our family. Over time, Solomon began to avoid clashing with my mother. However, it wasn't because he had given in to her. Instead, he focused on supporting me. "Jean, you're always trying so hard." Do you realize how amazing that is? Those words of encouragement from him still remain in my heart. Without him, I might have been completely crushed by the loneliness within our family. On the other hand, the cracks within our household were becoming irreparable. Solomon was doing his best for me, but he couldn't mend his relationship with my mother. From this point on, the time we spent together as a family began to decrease. It became more common for us to eat dinner separately. The situation where my sister was the center of the family remained unchanged, and Solomon and I felt like isolated entities orbiting around her. By the time I was about to graduate high school, I had one clear goal in my heart. It was to leave the house and live an independent life. Exhausted from the loneliness and strained relationships with my mother and sister, I strongly wished to start a new life by going to college. My mother didn't seem to take my college plans seriously. While I was choosing schools, she would talk only about my sister's lessons and school events. Even when I asked for her opinion about my future, she would only give a curt response like, "Go wherever you like." On the other hand, Solomon continued to cheer me on. "Jean, the sky is the limit. Go wherever you want," he said, encouraging me. His words were my only source of support. On the day of my high school graduation, I wore my cap and gown and looked out at the audience from the stage. I saw Solomon smiling proudly at me. Next to him was my mother, who was staring at her smartphone, seemingly texting the babysitter for my sister. That scene felt like a symbol of my position within the family. The day after the graduation ceremony, Solomon called me into his study. Holding a folder in his hand, he said, "I've been saving bit by bit." He showed me brochures from various universities. "Jean, you can go anywhere. I want to help you carve out your future," he said, his words bringing tears to my eyes. However, when my mother heard about this, she argued, "That money should be used for your sister's future," leading to a heated argument with Solomon. That night, Solomon told me, "Jean, I'm not backing down on this. You have the right to your freedom." Encouraged by his words, I decided to go to college. In the end, I chose Marshall University in West Virginia. It was a place where I could maintain a suitable distance from my family while starting a new chapter in life. When college began, I tasted freedom for the first time. Being freed from the shadow of my family, I realized how precious it was to have my own time. I devoted myself to my studies, enjoyed time with friends, and pursued things I had always wanted to do. However, my relationship with my family grew increasingly distant. My mother rarely contacted me, and the only connection I had was through phone calls with Solomon. "Jean, your mother still seems busy with your sister," Solomon said during one of our calls. There was fatigue in his voice as he continued, "She's doing her best to raise her, but that doesn't necessarily mean things are heading in the right direction." I couldn't find the words to respond. Living away from my family gave me a new perspective. I rediscovered my own worth and was in the process of healing old wounds. At the same time, I realized that the problems within my family were unfolding beyond my reach, leaving me with complex feelings. A few years after graduating from college, my life was shaken by a significant event. Solomon passed away suddenly. He was the only person in my family who truly understood and supported me. His death brought me immense grief, but more than that, it revealed how completely the balance within our family had fallen apart. After Solomon's death, my mother began to struggle financially. Since Solomon had been the primary breadwinner, our household quickly approached the brink of collapse without him. My mother started to rely on me, especially demanding that I help fund my sister's college education. "Jean, please. If you don't help, her future will be ruined," my mother pleaded with tears in her eyes. Her words shook me. But considering my past relationship with my family and the life I had built for myself, I couldn't agree so easily. However, in the end, I decided to accept my mother's request. From then on, I worked 3 jobs simultaneously to pay for my sister's college expenses. Living a life of working from early morning until late at night drained me physically and mentally, yet I rarely received gratitude from my mother or sister. My mother accepted the money as if it were a given, and my sister showed little interest in the matter. Their cold attitudes left new scars on my heart. One day, when I visited my family home after a long time, I found it in worse condition than ever before. The garden that Solomon used to maintain was overgrown, and the living room was cluttered with my sister's belongings. My mother sat on the couch with a tired expression, barely looking at me as she muttered, "Welcome home." Seeing this, I realized that no matter how much effort I put into supporting this family, I would never be acknowledged. Eventually, the day came when my sister graduated from college and entered the workforce. My mother bought a new dress to attend the graduation ceremony, her face beaming with joy. However, behind that joy, I felt as if all my efforts had been ignored. I was left with a gaping hole in my heart. With Solomon gone, my family had become entirely focused on my mother and sister, leaving my presence increasingly insignificant. Enduring this situation was not easy, but I couldn't give up on my own life. A few years after Solomon passed away, and I had been funding my sister's college expenses, a decisive rift occurred in our family during my mother's birthday party. That day, family and relatives gathered, and on the surface, the atmosphere was pleasant. My mother was more talkative than usual, sipping wine after wine and in high spirits. During the gathering, she casually let something slip in her drunken state. "Actually, I've made a will to leave all my assets to your sister," she said with a laugh. The moment those words reached my ears, it felt as though time had stopped. It was as if my existence within this family had been completely erased. When I tried to ask why, my mother, showing no sign of remorse, replied, "Because she has her whole life ahead of her. You're already independent, aren't you?" Her words carried not a trace of gratitude or consideration for me. They simply reflected her values, which prioritized my sister above all else. In that instant, all the emotions I had buried deep inside came rushing out. How much I had sacrificed to support this family, devoting my time and money to secure my sister's future. Yet, the reality that this was how I was treated filled me with indescribable anger and sorrow. After returning home, I thought deeply. Should I continue being the sacrificial lamb for this family? What meaning was there in maintaining a relationship with my mother and sister? After much deliberation, I made a decision. I needed to distance myself from this family and reclaim my life. A few days later, I wrote a letter to my mother. The message was straightforward, expressing my resolve to cease further assistance and calmly explaining my reasons for distancing myself. "Please don't take everything I've done for granted. I have the right to live my own life," I wrote, pouring my emotions into that sentence. Additionally, I confirmed that the house my mother and sister lived in was under my name and decided to proceed with selling it. This action marked the final severance of my ties with the family. In truth, the house we lived in had been purchased by my late father in my name. It seemed my mother had forgotten this. When she realized she was losing her home, she immediately called me, but I didn't answer. Her messages were filled with anger and confusion, asking, "Why are you doing this?" But I felt no obligation to respond. I couldn't find a reason to keep sacrificing myself any longer. Since I wasn't going to inherit anything, I decided to sell the house and use the proceeds for myself. While there was sadness in letting go of something my father had given me, I saw it as a step forward. Fortunately, I quickly found a buyer, and my mother had no choice but to leave the house when the eviction notice came. After cutting ties with my mother and sister, my life changed dramatically. It was also the moment I was freed from the burden I had carried for so many years. By choosing to live for myself, I found a quiet sense of peace within my heart. The first few weeks of no contact with my family felt strange. For the first time, the time I used to spend thinking about my mother and sister had completely disappeared. To fill that void, I set new goals for myself. I focused on work, improving my skills, and finding new hobbies. One day after work, I stopped by a cafe and found an opportunity to pursue something I had wanted to do for years, joining a photography class. Photography had been one of my dreams since high school, but it had been pushed aside amid the busyness of life. Learning at that class became a new source of inspiration for me, bringing vivid color back into my life. However, the guilt from cutting ties with my family didn't completely disappear. Occasionally, I received messages from my mother. Each time I saw them, I couldn't help but question whether my decision had been the right one. Even so, I felt that not replying was the only way to protect myself. Eventually, I decided to block my mother's email address. It was a form of closure for me. Some relatives criticized me, but those who knew about the incident at my mother's birthday party defended me. Now, my mother and sister have no family they can rely on and seem to be living quietly in a rundown apartment. Having realized that the house they once lived in was not their asset, I wonder how much inheritance my mother actually has left. There are rumors that she has started working part-time, so it seems unlikely she has anything substantial to leave to my sister. Taking care of yourself is not the same as betraying someone. With those words etched in my heart, I slowly started to rebuild my life at my own pace. On my days off, I went on trips with friends and began participating in volunteer activities, making an effort to expand my social circle. A few months passed, and I finally felt that my life had reached a stable point. My new apartment was a small space, but it was a place where I felt secure. The simple furniture and the landscape photos I had taken at the photography class symbolized my new life. One afternoon, I took some time to reflect on the past. The support Solomon had given me, my efforts to help my mother and sister, and the perseverance I had shown, all of these were experiences that shaped who I am today. There were undoubtedly painful moments in my journey, moments that felt as if they would overwhelm me completely. These moments weren't fleeting, they lingered, etched into my memory like scars that told stories of survival and growth. Yet, in hindsight, I came to understand that these challenges, no matter how overwhelming they seemed at the time, ultimately made me stronger. They shaped me into someone who could face adversity, someone who could stand tall, even when the world felt like it was crumbling around me. Each struggle, each disappointment, and each sacrifice I made acted as a stepping stone, guiding me toward rediscovering my own worth. For years, I had placed others' needs above my own, questioning whether my efforts even mattered or if I deserved any happiness for myself. But now, as I reflected on all that had happened, I realized that those struggles were not in vain. While driving one day, a surprising sensation crept over me. I felt a genuine smile spreading across my face. It wasn't a forced expression or something fleeting, it was a deep and unshakable smile that came from within. It was the kind of smile that only arises when the weight of the past begins to lift and peace takes its place. I felt light, as if the heavy burdens I had carried for so long had finally been lifted off my shoulders. The chains of obligation that had tethered me to my family's problems had been broken, freeing me in ways I hadn't imagined possible. The air seemed clearer, the road smoother, and the horizon brighter. It was in that moment I realized all the struggles I had endured, the tears I cried, the sleepless nights, the sacrifices had finally paid off. They had led me here, to this sense of peace and freedom that I had thought was unattainable. Their problems, the ones that had consumed so much of my life, were no longer my problems to solve. I had stepped away from their shadows, and for the first time I could focus on myself without guilt or hesitation. I was finally ready to walk my own path, one that was shaped by my dreams, my choices, and my desires, not by the weight of others' expectations. "This is my new beginning," I whispered to myself, my voice barely audible yet filled with conviction and hope. As I pressed down on the accelerator, I felt the car surge forward, responding to my will. The road ahead stretched endlessly, a winding path that disappeared into the vast horizon. Above me, the wide-open sky, with its brilliant shades of blue, felt like a promise of infinite possibilities and uncharted adventures. The journey ahead was unknown, but for the first time I wasn't afraid of what I might encounter. With each mile I drove, I felt as though I was shedding the layers of my past, the pain, the doubts, the sacrifices. I was leaving them behind, letting them fade into the distance as I focused on what lay ahead. This drive wasn't just about covering physical distance, it was about moving forward emotionally, reclaiming my sense of self, and embracing the freedom I had fought so hard to achieve. The road before me wasn't merely a path, it was a symbol of the life I was ready to build for myself, a life rooted in self-love and independence. The car hummed beneath me, steady and reliable, as if it too understood the significance of this journey. With each turn of the wheel, I felt myself moving closer to a brighter, freer, and more fulfilling future. This moment, this drive, was more than just a physical escape, it was the start of something profound. I had finally chosen myself, and that choice filled me with a joy I hadn't experienced in years. "This is my new beginning," I repeated, the words echoing in my mind like a mantra. Ahead of me stretched an open road, boundless and inviting, with a sky so vast it seemed to hold every possibility I could imagine. My name is Michelle, and I am a 26-year-old who has always felt unwanted and marginalized within the dynamics of my family. In a stark and painful contrast, my younger sister Christina, who is 4 years my junior, has perpetually been the focal point of our family's attention and affection. Our parents have consistently adored and spoiled her, always endorsing her actions and decisions, no matter the circumstance. Whenever Christina encountered even the smallest of obstacles, our parents were quick to come to her aid, offering her support and solutions. Meanwhile, my own efforts and achievements were frequently ignored and undervalued by everyone around me. One seemingly ordinary day, our parents were busy preparing for an outing to a nearby park. My mother was preoccupied with packing various items into a bag, while my father frantically searched for his car keys. Amidst this flurry of activity, Christina, as was typical for her, was bubbling with excitement and impatience, eagerly urging them to hurry up. Feeling a surge of longing to be included, I approached my mother and tentatively expressed my desire to join them, saying, "I want to come along too." However, she merely glanced at me briefly with a cold expression and dismissively responded, "Michelle, you should stay home and do your homework." Her words constricted my heart like a vice. My father remained silent, offering no words of support, and Christina cheerily exited the house, cheerfully calling out, "See you later." I was left behind, relegated to the solitude of the living room, sitting on the sofa and blankly staring out the window. The silence in the house was oppressive, marked only by the incessant ticking of the clock. My parents neglected me, only insisting that I do my homework, and I was constantly excluded from family events. Throughout my childhood, Christina often approached me with a sense of innocent enthusiasm, asking if we could play together. Whenever I was engaged in an activity, she would eagerly want to join in, chirping, "Me too," and it felt entirely natural for her to be at my side. However, as she grew older, she began to realize the special treatment she received from our parents. They showered her with affection and praise for even the most trivial accomplishments, while they exhibited a cold indifference towards me, showing no interest in my endeavors or feelings. This disparity in treatment became increasingly evident to Christina, and over time, she developed a noticeable sense of superiority over me. Her once innocent demeanor gradually morphed into one of condescension. She began to dismiss my conversations casually and would laugh at my failures. While she maintained the facade of a perfect, obedient child in front of our parents, her attitude towards me grew colder. I felt an escalating sense of isolation within the family, a feeling that I was an outsider in my own home. After graduating from high school, I took a job as a waitress in a local restaurant. Initially filled with anxiety, I gradually began to find my rhythm and started to derive some enjoyment from my work. Unfortunately, my family failed to recognize this job as a valid or respectable career. My mother often made disparaging remarks, belittling my occupation by asking, "Is this the only job you can do?" She seldom showed any interest in the stories I shared about my work life. Similarly, Christina would offer only superficial support, remarking, Being a waitress is a respectable job, yet her words lacked any genuine interest or warmth. At family gatherings, I often felt invisible as both my parents and Christina seemed to ignore my presence, a recurring pain that deeply hurt me, yet I continued to yearn for their recognition and love. When I was 20 years old, I met Arthur through a mutual friend. He initially appeared shy and serious, but as we began to talk more, I was drawn to his profound kindness and empathy. We quickly formed a close bond, and after several outings together, our friendship blossomed into a romantic relationship. Spending time with Arthur became the highlight of my days, and we eventually decided to move in together. My life began to revolve around our shared moments, each day feeling special because of his presence. He was not only a source of comfort at home, but also an adventurous companion with whom I shared my outdoor pursuits. As I embarked on this new chapter with Arthur, I found myself distancing from my parents and Christina. Engrossed in my work and life with Arthur, my interactions with my family decreased significantly. The time I spent with Arthur provided a comforting escape from the unresolved traumas and emotional neglect I had experienced at home. One day, after a long period of absence, I made the decision to attend a family gathering, which stirred up a complex mix of emotions that I had suppressed for years. I engaged in light conversations with relatives I hadn't seen in a while, yet I noticed that my parents and Christina still treated me as though I were invisible. Unexpectedly, Christina loudly announced to everyone at the gathering, "I'm getting married." I was taken aback as this news was disclosed to me at the same time as it was to the other relatives, with no prior indication from her or my parents. This revelation overwhelmed me with a mixture of emotions, and I felt a distinct chill in the manner in which this news was shared within the family. Speechless, I could only silently accept the atmosphere of the moment as discussions quickly shifted to focus entirely on Christina's upcoming wedding, further marginalizing my presence. I experienced an indescribable sense of loneliness and sadness, which gradually deepened. Despite maintaining a smile for the sake of appearances, I felt a profound sense of alienation from my family. As preparations for the wedding began in earnest, my feelings of exclusion only intensified. Since I had moved out of the family home, I was not kept informed about the details of Christina's wedding plans. In an attempt to be involved, I sent her a message saying, "If there's anything I can help with, just let me know," only to receive a curt and dismissive reply. "It's okay." Her indifference towards me made me feel even more insignificant and deepened my sense of alienation from the family. A few days later, I received an unexpected call from Christina. "Michelle, can I ask you about the wedding dress?" Surprised and willing to assist with anything related to her wedding, I eagerly awaited her instructions. However, her next words left me utterly speechless. "But you're not invited to the ceremony." The stark reality that I wasn't even invited to my own sister's wedding weighed heavily on my heart. Desperate for an explanation, I managed to ask why. I couldn't comprehend why I had been excluded. Christina paused for a moment, then sighed deeply and responded, "Because I simply do not want my soon-to-be husband Wesley and his parents to become aware that your occupation is that of a waitress." As soon as those words pierced the air, an intense pain tore through my heart, feeling as if it were being ripped apart. To exclude me for such a superficial reason. My voice trembled with a mixture of disbelief and hurt, but Christina responded with a chilling indifference. "That's just the way it is. If you truly cared about my happiness, you would understand, wouldn't you?" I stood there, utterly stunned. It was clear that Christina failed to comprehend the profound depth of pain her words inflicted upon me. She seemed oblivious to how deeply wounded I was, a hurt that extended far beyond what she could possibly imagine. "Have you ever even considered my feelings? Please think about me as well." At this, Christina's voice grew louder. I was momentarily taken aback and involuntarily swallowed my next words, fully aware of how significantly she prioritized her own status above all else. "Fine, I'll email you the details about the dress," she remarked dismissively before unilaterally ending the call. At that moment, a constricting tightness enveloped my chest. A tumultuous blend of anger and sadness churned within me, leaving me grappling with a whirlwind of emotions. I had never envisioned that not being invited to my sister's wedding could inflict such profound pain. I resolved to compose myself and discuss this matter with our parents. Upon calling them, my father dismissed my concerns with a chuckle, suggesting, "That must be some kind of joke," while my mother mocked me with disbelief. "Christina would never say such a thing." These words nearly shattered my heart. They didn't believe a single word I said. This interaction only served to reaffirm the extent of my alienation within my own family, and a profound sense of disappointment washed over me. Unable to endure the cold treatment from my family any longer, I returned to the sanctuary of my home, where Arthur was seated on the sofa. He could instantly tell something was amiss and quietly inquired, "What happened?" I chose not to force a smile and instead opened up about everything: the wedding, the disheartening conversation with our parents, and the deep-seated feelings of alienation I had endured. As I concluded my recount, tears were threatening to spill. Arthur listened intently in silence. After a reflective pause, he sighed deeply and began to disclose something unexpected. "Actually, there's something I need to tell you. I've been secretly working as Christina's wedding planner." His revelation left me wide-eyed, a complex mixture of surprise and suspicion rendering me momentarily speechless. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" I managed to stammer out. Arthur's expression twisted slightly in discomfort. "I knew you had distanced yourself from your parents and Christina, and considering that, I opted to remain silent. I was aware of how this situation could affect you." His words elicited mixed feelings in me. Although I appreciated that Arthur was being considerate of my emotions, a part of me wished he had clued me in sooner about how isolated I had become within my family. "But Christina asked about the dress, didn't she?" Arthur moved to sit beside me, gently draping an arm around my shoulders. "Yes, but I believe the fact that she asked you about the dress indicates that she relies on you in some capacity." His soothing words quietly resonated with me. I looked up at him, pondering his perspective. Perhaps Christina might reconsider and decide to invite you to the wedding. After all, if she genuinely disliked you, she wouldn't have requested your help with the dress, right? Arthur offered a gentle smile, his words slightly warming the chill I felt inside, yet I remained conflicted internally. I honestly wasn't sure if Christina would actually extend an invitation to me for the wedding. Arthur stayed close by, providing comfort as I continued to grapple with my tangled emotions. Meanwhile, I proceeded with the preparations for Christina's wedding dress amidst a backdrop of complex feelings. Each time I thought about the wedding, a crushing sense of exclusion overwhelmed me, but I remained focused on perfecting the dress. Despite the pain stemming from not being invited, I resolved to do my utmost for her. It was the only action I felt capable of taking. Yet, deep down, I nurtured a faint hope that she might eventually invite me. I meticulously followed Christina's detailed instructions, paying close attention to every aspect of the fabric and design to ensure the dress was flawless. However, no invitation to the wedding ever materialized. Then came the day of the rehearsal dinner. The venue was adorned beautifully, and relatives and friends gathered, enveloped in a festive atmosphere. During this event, Wesley, Christina's fiancé, appeared visibly puzzled by my absence. We had been acquaintances since our college days, although not intimately close. We had always maintained a comfortable rapport. This likely fueled his concern over my absence. During a break in the dinner, he approached Christina with a question. "Hey, why isn't Michelle here at the rehearsal dinner?" "She's family too, isn't she?" Christina hesitated briefly before responding with a forced smile. "Well, she seems to be busy with work. I don't think it's something to worry about." Wesley's expression clouded with a slight frown as he persisted. "But isn't it strange that your sister isn't participating?" Those words must have been unexpected for Christina. After pondering for a moment, Christina spoke. "Well, maybe. But you're certainly attending the wedding, right? Let's focus on enjoying this rehearsal dinner for now." Wesley, though still somewhat puzzled by the exchange, chose to take Christina's words at face value and accept her reassurance. Following the conclusion of the dinner, much to my surprise, I received an unexpected call from my sister. "Why did you snitch to Wesley?" Christina's voice, quivering with anger and accusation, filled my ears. "What snitching are you referring to?" I responded, genuinely confused and bewildered by her sudden hostility. "Michelle, you must have told Wesley to ask me to invite you to the wedding, didn't you?" Christina's accusation was sharp and piercing, echoing with a tone of betrayal through the phone. "No, I didn't say anything like that." "Don't lie to me." "Then why else would Wesley say such a thing? You must have manipulated him to secure an invitation to the wedding." Christina's harsh words struck me deeply, inflicting significant emotional pain. "I really didn't say anything, Christina." I choked out, struggling to defend myself amidst her unfounded accusations. "Stop interfering with my wedding. It's none of your business." Saying that, Christina hung up the phone. Several hours later, my phone rang again, this time displaying the names of our parents. As I answered, I was immediately met with my mother's icy voice, her words dripping with disappointment. "Michelle, what are you thinking? Interfering in your sister's wedding, what could possibly be your motive?" Her accusation shocked me. "I didn't ask for anything. Wesley was merely curious," I tried to explain, but my father's stern and disapproving voice soon followed, adding to the barrage of criticisms. "Do you realize the extent of the trouble you've caused Christina with your actions?" he demanded, his tone cold and accusatory. At that moment, a surge of intense anger and frustration welled up inside me, compounded by the injustice of being misunderstood and unfairly blamed. "I don't want to say anything anymore. It's clear no one believes me anyway," I concluded, feeling utterly defeated and helpless, and ended the call, tears threatening to spill over. Crushed by the harsh words of my family, I was overwhelmed by a profound sense of frustration, yet I was not ready to leave the situation unresolved. Driven by a mix of anger and determination, I picked up the phone and called Arthur. "Arthur, please, go ahead and cancel the rental of Christina's wedding dress." There was a brief pause on the line as Arthur processed my request, but he eventually responded with understanding and support. "Okay, I understand how you feel. I'll support your decision." From what Arthur later told me, Christina was visibly distraught, unable to grasp the unfolding events. On the day of the wedding dress did not arrive as planned. It is said that the guests were abuzz at the venue. Amid the mishap of the missing wedding dress, the ceremony apparently came to an end. In the aftermath of the ceremony, unable to contain her frustration and anger, she confronted Arthur, demanding, "Why did this happen? What were you doing as the planner? You've ruined my most important day." Following these tumultuous events, Christina departed on her honeymoon with Wesley. Unexpectedly, during their honeymoon, I received a call from Wesley. His voice carried a tone of confusion and concern. "Michelle, I need to ask you something. I tried discussing why you weren't at the wedding with Christina, but she's been evasive." He continued, his words tinged with confusion and suspicion. "Honestly, I've been puzzled about your absence. I felt compelled to know the reason, so I'm calling you even though we're still on our honeymoon." Anxiety and suspicion were evident in his voice. I carefully chose my words as I responded. "It's because Christina was concerned about you and your parents knowing I'm a waitress. She was probably worried about how you might perceive that, especially since she wasn't aware that we're friends." After a moment of silence, Wesley replied, somewhat shocked, "I can't believe Christina would think that way." He calmly accepted the truth as it dawned on him during their honeymoon. Leading him to make a decisive and dramatic choice, he declared his intention to divorce Christina. When Christina returned from the honeymoon, she went to her old house only to discover a for sale sign planted in the front yard. Frantically, she called me. "What's going on? Why is the house being sold?" I responded calmly after taking a brief moment. "Our parents asked me to let you stay there, but since you got married, I assumed it was no longer necessary and decided to sell it." Christina was silent for a moment. Then her voice, trembling with emotion, revealed, "Actually, I'm getting divorced." I was taken aback and momentarily lost for words. "Divorce? But weren't you just on your honeymoon?" As I spoke, the memory of Wesley's unexpected call during their honeymoon resurfaced in my mind. "You're to blame for my divorce." Christina's accusation shook me deeply. I found myself speechless, feeling the sting of her words deeply. "Wesley discovered that you weren't invited to the wedding because I didn't want him to find out you're a waitress. You must have told him everything, didn't you?" As Christina's anger was directed fiercely at me, I stood silently, overwhelmed by the situation. "It's all your fault," I managed to reply with a trembling voice. "Christina, I never intended to hurt you, but when Wesley asked, I couldn't lie. I never imagined he would decide to divorce you." Christina interrupted me, shouting, "Don't make excuses. You need to take responsibility." With that, the call ended. A few days later, I saw our parents' names flash on my phone screen and sighed loudly, bracing myself for another unpleasant conversation. As soon as I answered, my mother's cold voice came through, laden with disappointment. "It's truly unfortunate what happened to Christina. You instigated this by telling Wesley, didn't you? What a terrible sister you are." My father chimed in, echoing her sentiments. "You always do this. You never think about the family. What were you hoping to achieve by hurting Christina?" The accusation made my blood boil with anger. I retorted sharply, "You're never going to believe me anyway. You act as if I'm entirely to blame for Christina's hurt, but you understand nothing at all." After a brief silence, my mother sighed. "You really lack compassion for your family." I couldn't help but respond with a cold, bitter laugh. "Me? Lacking compassion? Are you implying that you have ever shown any compassion towards me?" Silence fell on the other end of the line before I continued in a frosty tone. "We're not even a family. I don't care what happens to Christina anymore." With those final words, I hung up the phone, resolute in my decision to no longer involve myself with Christina. However, Christina didn't cease her efforts to target me. She began to denounce me on social media, posting daily claims that my divorce is all because of my sister, directly blaming me for the collapse of her marriage. Her posts escalated each day, turning into attacks not just on me but also on our family and friends. One day at work, Christina burst into the store where I was working at. Upon spotting me, she immediately raised her voice, startling everyone around. "You've ruined my life." As she stormed towards me, yelling, my coworkers watched in shock. Ignoring the bystanders, Christina pointed accusingly at me and shouted, "You caused my divorce by telling Wesley." Her voice reverberated throughout the store. Struggling to maintain my composure, I attempted to calm the situation. "Christina, please stop this here." But her anger was unrelenting, and she continued to loudly berate me, causing discomfort among the customers. Christina's behavior had spiraled completely out of control, forcing me to call security to handle the escalating situation. On another occasion, she barged into my home, shoving me aside and beginning to smash items inside. I quickly grabbed my cell phone and recorded her aggressive behavior. Christina's harassment persisted. She filled my mailbox with threatening letters and vandalized my door with horrible graffiti. Each morning, I was greeted with hateful words like traitor and worst sister scrawled across my door. The intensity of the messages in the letters escalated, with phrases like "You've caused me to lose everything," and "I will never forgive you." Initially, I tried to dismiss her actions, but as neighbors began to express their concern, asking, "Have you seen the woman causing a scene outside your house? Are you okay?" the situation started to take a significant mental toll on me. I never anticipated Christina's obsession would reach such an extreme. Reaching my breaking point, I consulted with Arthur and decided to take legal action. We spoke with a lawyer and filed a lawsuit to stop her behavior, which was clearly identified as violent harassment and stalking. The evidence I had collected was compelling, clearly documenting Christina's series of harassing actions against me. After several months, the court issued its verdict. Christina received a suspended sentence of 1 year with mandatory counseling, and a restraining order was issued to prevent her from approaching me again, providing me with legal protection from further harassment. This verdict brought a significant sense of relief, as it finally restored some peace to my life. Nevertheless, Christina's actions didn't cease there. She filed a civil lawsuit against me, seeking damages under the pretext that I had caused her harm. I consulted with my lawyer again and decided to propose a settlement to avoid a prolonged court battle. Eventually, Christina reluctantly agreed to settle after our parents persuaded her, arguing, "Making a bigger issue out of this serves no purpose. It's better for you to step back now." Christina remained dissatisfied to the end, muttering resentfully, "It's all her fault." After the settlement, now legally protected, I gradually began to reclaim a sense of normalcy in my life. Whenever I felt anxious, Arthur was there to provide comfort and support. While the scars from the past events may never completely vanish with Arthur's steady presence, I no longer live in fear and am able to enjoy a peaceful daily life. We moved to a new city, severing ties with my family and the past, and embarked on a fresh start with Arthur. Each morning, we would sit together, sipping coffee and discussing our plans for the day. These simple, everyday routines became my greatest source of happiness. "From now on, let's walk forward together," Arthur would say, gently holding my hand. The warmth of his touch permeated through to my heart, soothing the residual pain. Although the shadows of the past lingered, I was no longer alone. With Arthur by my side, I found the courage to step into a new future. I took a deep breath and faced forward, ready to embrace whatever came our way. I want to be able to repay my parents for their kindness. The reason I began to think this way was due to the efforts and love I felt from my parents during my childhood. Despite not being wealthy, they managed to find the money for my education and worked hard to support my future. In response, I made every effort, and after graduating from high school, I aimed for a private university, but there were financial constraints. Nevertheless, my parents explored scholarships and educational loans to support me. I focused on my studies, aiming for a merit-based scholarship, and at university, I was able to reduce the financial burden on my family as a scholarship student. Yet my parents still helped with part of the food, rent, and material costs. After progressing to higher education, I balanced my studies with part-time jobs and maintained my grades until graduation. When I received a job offer from a leading foreign company after graduating from university, I felt like I was finally starting to repay my parents for their efforts. The desire to give back to my parents with my own efforts became the driving force for my new life, but my workplace was at a foreign company that was highly competitive, and the pressure to perform was a daily burden. In my first year, I made many mistakes and was often scolded by my boss. Despite this, I continued to work hard, supported by the thought of doing my best for my family. As I became accustomed to the work and found efficient ways to produce results, I gained the trust of my seniors and supervisors. By the time I had been with the company for 5 years, I had been promoted to team leader and was entrusted with projects. Thanks to my efforts, I consistently ranked high in performance evaluations and had opportunities for pay raises and promotions. Over time, I was gradually able to build a comfortable financial cushion by saving diligently for 10 years. One day in the 10th year, I suddenly felt a strong desire to show my gratitude to my parents in a tangible way. By that time, my income had stabilized and my savings were close to the target amount. What I had in mind was a plan to gift my parents a new house. They had lived for a long time in an old single-family home that was falling apart everywhere. I wanted to free them from that daily life and provide a comfortable living environment. My concern was that my younger sister had been causing trouble for our parents. She had been spoiled as the second daughter from a young age and had grown into an adult who could not stand on her own, living off our parents. Although it was also my parents' choice not to forcibly separate her from them, I still wanted to repay them in some way. So I started researching to find the best house. I looked for properties mainly in the area where my parents had lived for many years, selecting some candidates with good access to public transport, convenient shopping, and close to hospitals. On weekends, I visited real estate agencies, repeated model room visits and viewings, and aimed to find a property that would meet my parents' wishes as much as possible. After selecting several properties as candidates, when I finally found the ideal house, I promptly proceeded with the purchase. The house was south-facing with good sunlight, featuring a spacious living room and a kitchen equipped with the latest facilities. Furthermore, the layout allowed for private spaces for both my father and mother on the second floor, with modifications possible for future caregiving. I was confident that I could provide a living environment that was easy for my parents to use and live in safely. To be honest, equipping it with all these facilities cost considerably more than I had imagined. Although I felt temporarily relieved after paying the down payment, the reality of having to make monthly mortgage repayments inevitably weighed heavily on my life. Nonetheless, even faced with this reality, I felt no regret. Instead, I felt a greater sense of fulfillment that I had been able to reach a moment where my efforts, planned and built up step by step, were finally rewarded. When I told my parents about the purchase of the new house, they were initially surprised and could not believe it. My father, especially, asked repeatedly, "Are you really sure?" while showing an undeniable smile, which I still remember. My mother also looked incredulous, repeatedly gazing at the house's photos and tearfully saying, "I never thought I could live in such a splendid house," and simply said, "Thank you." Seeing my parents truly happy was the best reward for me, and I was once again convinced that this choice was not a mistake. I felt a warmth in my heart as I realized that my efforts had finally reached them in a concrete form. The preparation for the move went smoothly, and their new life started. Every time I saw my parents sitting in the living room of the new house, looking comfortable and happy, I felt happy too. This prompted me to approach my own life with even more positivity. However, the beginning of this hopeful new life gradually came with a sense of discomfort. Initially, I watched my parents live in the new house while steadily continuing to make mortgage repayments. The monthly payments were by no means small, but I encouraged myself by thinking, "This is my way of giving back to them." However, the opportunities to be thanked for my efforts gradually decreased, and it began to feel like an expected duty. As my job became busier, the time I could see my parents decreased. Eventually, I heard that my sister was frequently visiting my parents' house. Curious, I called her. "Have you been going to Mom and Dad's house every day recently? What about your apartment?" I asked. Then, unexpectedly, she replied, "I've moved out of the apartment. I've decided to live with them from now on." What? Why so suddenly? Well, there were various things. Anyway, that's the situation, she said lightly, and I was momentarily at a loss for words. The fact that my sister was also living in the house I had bought for my parents somehow felt off, and a small unease grew within me. After all, I wondered how much she really understood the responsibility I had carried, the inner conflicts that came with it, and the decision I had made solely for our parents' sake. Moreover, the fact that my parents had not informed me in advance about my sister moving into the house also felt unsettling. Even a single word of consultation might have made me feel differently. I mulled over in my head. In that moment, I felt as if my existence was reduced to merely providing money, weighing heavily on my heart. Since my sister started living with my parents, an unsettling restlessness continued in my heart. This is especially true every time my parents told me how naturally my sister had adapted to living in the new house, as if she had always lived there. Hearing that, a small discomfort slowly spread in the depths of my heart. It was hard to describe this feeling as either jealousy or anger. It was slightly different from either emotion, a complex sentiment that couldn't be easily put into words. Feeling unable to sort out my feelings, I decided to visit my parents' house the next weekend. Once there, I saw my sister relaxing and watching TV in the living room, and I sat down beside her. Then, seizing the moment, I decided to voice the question that had been lingering in my mind. "Hey, why did you move out of your apartment? Did Mom and Dad say something to you?" My sister answered nonchalantly with a slight smile. "Because I was having a tough time with money. Mom and Dad said I could live here, and I thought you would naturally agree." At that moment, the small discomfort in my chest swelled suddenly and pressed down heavily. It seemed that I had been completely left out of this discussion between my parents and my sister. Her words intensified the discomfort inside me. When I bought this house, it involved considerable effort and sacrifice. I could finally acquire the house after long hours of overtime and working on holidays. Yet, within the family, it seemed natural for my sister to live here, a notion I simply could not accept. Why allow my sister to live here without considering me, the investor? It's not that my sister was at fault. She was merely following our parents' words. But to me, this house wasn't just a building. It was the embodiment of my efforts and a symbol of my pride. That's why I felt resistance to sharing it easily even with my sister. Therefore, I decided to ask my parents as well. "Mom, I heard Nicole is living here now, but why didn't you tell me anything?" When I asked, my mother began to speak with an awkward expression. "Because you seemed busy. I thought I shouldn't trouble you with it." These words left me feeling helpless. Busy as I was, I regretted not being involved in this important decision. I also talked to my father. "It's natural to help each other because we're family," he said clearly. I felt frustrated that I couldn't argue with that. Indeed, maybe it's because we're family that we should support each other. However, it felt like my burdens and feelings as the one supporting them were being overlooked, leaving me dissatisfied. Weeks after my sister and parents started living together, I noticed a gradual change in the atmosphere at home. Despite being often at home, my sister did not help with household chores and was mostly uninvolved. She seemed to be relaxing in her room most of the time and contributed nothing to the household expenses, despite having a job. This situation continued, with her contributing nothing to the house's expenses, and I couldn't help feeling discontent. The unease inside me only grew. It seemed an uncomfortable feeling had taken root within me. One day, compounded by stress at work, I finally expressed my feelings to my sister. "Honestly, have you ever considered how hard I worked to buy that house? I'm still paying the mortgage, yet you contribute nothing to the living expenses and don't even seem to be looking for a new apartment. It feels like my efforts are being ignored, and honestly, it's tough." My sister looked surprised, and after a moment of silence, she spoke in a small voice. "I didn't know you felt that way, but buying the house was your decision, and it's hard for everyone, so I was just overwhelmed with my own issues." Hearing this, I realized why I had exploded with emotion. I wanted my sister to understand the thoughts and efforts I had put into that house, and to acknowledge them. Through this incident with my sister and parents, I deeply felt the importance of boundaries in family relationships. Just because we are family, we should not take sharing everything for granted but build our relationship while respecting each other's efforts and feelings. I don't know how my relationship with my sister will change in the future. However, by gradually expressing the frustrations I had been holding inside, I might be able to rebuild my relationship with her. But that day marked a turning point in my life. My parents hosted a housewarming party. The fact that I was not invited was the beginning. Had it not been for that event, I might not have experienced such deep pain and loneliness. But reality was harsh and merciless. About a month ago, I had heard from my parents that they were planning a housewarming party. At that time, I felt nothing. The house is new, so let's celebrate grandly, they said, and I naturally agreed and planned to adjust my schedule to attend. However, days passed, and I received no information about when it would be held. Having expected to be invited, I started to feel uneasy. About 2 weeks ago, during a long overdue visit home, I noticed something different about the time I spent with my family. My parents, who used to laugh and chat often, now seemed a bit cold. My sister's gaze was sharp, and I continued to ignore it. Even though I felt this discomfort, I thought it might just be my imagination. However, the lack of communication confirmed my suspicions, and I decided to take action. One afternoon, I hesitated but ultimately decided to go to my parents' house. I didn't call or message them in advance. When I rang the doorbell and entered the house without any prior notice, I found it bustling. My parents and sister were busy preparing decorations and arranging catering. I approached my sister, who was nearby. "What are you doing?" "What does it look like? We're preparing for the housewarming party. The guests will arrive soon," she replied. I was stunned and managed to say, "I didn't get any notification." She responded coldly, "We didn't send one. Do we need to invite you? Your role is over." I was speechless at her ruthlessness, and a chilling sensation enveloped my heart. Instinctively, I asked, "What?" But my sister's eyes were looking somewhere far away. My parents were looking in my direction. Both spoke to me with indifferent expressions, without lifting their faces. "We've raised you and paid your university tuition, so this is the least you can do," they said. Those words spread an indescribable chill through my heart. It was as if they were saying I was no longer needed. Then, my sister coldly declared, "Your role is finished. Get out of the house." Her words echoed in my ears and pierced my heart. The cold expression on my sister's face and her words seemed meaningless, or was it just me who felt that way? My parents, too, were there, laughing and saying nothing. I couldn't suppress the rising anger and sadness inside me. The frustration of having spent 10 years working hard and making sacrifices for my family, only to be treated as if it were all meaningless, was indescribable. However, I did not show my feelings outwardly. At that moment, a decision formed in my heart. I had come this far without letting my family know that I was the owner of the house, but there was no reason to remain silent any longer. Right then, I took out the deed to the house and presented it in front of them. "I am the owner of this house, and I have no intention of changing that. I've been paying all the mortgage for this house. You've been living here because I allowed it," I declared firmly. The faces of my parents and sister contorted. My sister tried to argue, but I cut her off. "If you intend to kick me out, it's simple. You are the ones who will leave this house." They looked at me incredulously, but I continued without flinching, expressing my determination. "If you want to continue living here, you should have at least shown some gratitude, but that chance is gone. I will no longer be your sacrifice." Afterward, I formally notified them through a lawyer that they had to vacate the house, and I gave them a grace period to leave. Naturally, my parents and sister begged and yelled various emotions at me. But I did not change my mind. I reminded myself that this was a necessary step for me to move forward in life. Eventually, they had no choice but to leave the house. After they were evicted, my sister went around to our relatives' houses, spewing complaints and insults about me. She suddenly kicked us out of the house, she repeatedly claimed, portraying themselves as unfairly treated. However, our relatives gradually began to realize the truth. The fact that my sister had moved out of her apartment without planning ahead, and that the entire family had been taking it for granted to rely on me, came to light. Additionally, it became known that I had taken on a decade's worth of effort and a substantial mortgage to buy the house and support the family's lifestyle. The inconsistency between my sister's claims and my actions led the relatives to eventually distrust her story. Some of them even reached out to me to hear my side of the situation. I explained the circumstances of the house purchase and the attitudes of my parents and sister calmly and without emotion. As a result, the relatives agreed with my stance and were critical of my parents and sister for depending on me excessively and lacking gratitude. My sister's actions resulted in the family becoming isolated, a consequence of these facts becoming known to others. As I severed ties with my family, they became isolated from our relatives as well. Following this, my parents and sister found themselves in severe financial difficulty. At first, my mother struggled with managing living expenses and sought help from relatives. However, the response they got was cold, and they were mostly alienated due to their selfish actions. Both my sister and father also received little support from our relatives. My mother repeatedly apologized to me in tears, but I did not respond. Since that day, I have blocked all contact with my parents and sister. The bond that once existed in our family, known for its mutual support among relatives, completely collapsed as a mere result of ruthless actions. Nevertheless, I did not step back but moved steadily forward to the next step. After stopping the mortgage payments, I immediately contacted professionals and started the process of selling the house. After ensuring there were no legal issues, I assessed the condition and value of the house and prepared it for the market. This decision marks a new beginning for me. I reaffirmed to myself repeatedly, I cannot reclaim the past. However, I understood that I needed to take action for my current self in order to envision a future. The event that would change my life by 180 degrees began with a piece of news I stumbled upon one day. It was a report that the real estate market was unexpectedly booming, and the land value in the area where I had bought my house was rising sharply. When I heard this information, it felt as if a current had run through my mind. Until then, I had never deeply considered the value of the house I owned. It was something I had purchased merely to provide a comfortable living space for my family. A few days later, when I received the appraisal results, I couldn't believe my eyes. The house could be sold for about 10% more than the purchase price. Moreover, due to the high demand for houses in the area, it was possible that the selling price could increase even further depending on the conditions. This news filled me with hope that the difficult days I had endured were beginning to fade. I didn't hesitate to decide to sell, and I swiftly began the preparations. There was a mountain of tasks to be done: organizing documents, inspecting the house, negotiating with real estate agents. But my hands moved quickly through all the tasks. Weeks passed, and the day to complete the sale of the house arrived. That morning, I held the documents in my hand and quietly left the house alone. I felt that the person reflected in my family's eyes was no longer the person I used to be. To them, I must have appeared as a heartless person. However, they couldn't understand how deeply their actions had wounded me. I had firmly vowed to act ruthlessly to cut ties with the past and walk towards a new future. The final selling price of the house was about 15% higher than the initial purchase price, a result that exceeded expectations. With that money in hand, I first paid off the long-standing mortgage in full, achieving financial freedom. Meanwhile, I heard from relatives that my parents and sister were still struggling to find a new home. Without substantial funds, it was difficult for them to secure decent residence. My mother began to receive harsh words from relatives and neighbors, such as wasting her daughter's efforts, and losing an important house for their own selfish desires, losing the peaceful days she once had. These criticisms became a severe social pressure unlike anything she had experienced before, eating away at her heart. My sister, somewhat aware that her irresponsible behavior was to blame, remained unable to admit her faults. Moreover, her spending habits hadn't changed, and my parents were at their wits' end. The pensions my parents received were not enough to support even a modest lifestyle, especially with a spendthrift like my sister increasing the burden. Unable to stop spending on expensive clothes and hobbies, and with living expenses often falling short, the little savings my parents had gradually began to run out. Even when asked to save, my sister's casual attitude of, it'll be fine, remained unchanged, further increasing the burden on my parents. Faced with this situation, my parents had to return to work to supplement their living expenses. However, the jobs available to them in their old age were limited, and my mother had to take up unfamiliar part-time work while my father was forced into physically demanding light labor. Despite this, my sister's continued spending meant that the balance between income and expenses was always unstable, making life increasingly difficult. Family relations grew more strained, and my parents, losing their emotional and physical reserves, often argued, while my sister showed no real consideration for the causes. The cumulative burden of her spending eventually depleted my parents' retirement funds, and financial worries became a regular part of their daily lives. The distortions that had been present in the household finally surfaced, but with no way to repair them, the relationship between my parents and my sister only grew more hostile. The stability built through the purchase of the house collapsed, leaving behind only scenes of each pushing heavy responsibilities onto the other. The actions they had once taken against me had indeed come back to haunt them. As I reflected on the time and effort I had dedicated for the sake of my family, I did not look back. I had chosen to live a life for myself at last. In my new residence, I arranged the interior to my liking, creating a comfortable space. While dedicating myself to my work, I enjoyed my hobbies and interactions with new friends in my free time. Now freed from a family that only sought to use me, I had finally attained true freedom and peace. I had a happy childhood in a very ordinary family. We went on picnics with my parents, and I have memories of running through the park, accompanied by my mother's warm smile. Everything felt like an irreplaceable treasure. However, everything changed the moment my sister was born. Her name is Samantha. She joined our family when I was 6 years old. I understood even then how adorable a newborn baby could be. Both my parents adored Samantha, delighting in her every move. I never imagined that this would gradually begin to constrict my heart. My mother clearly started devoting more time and affection to Samantha. It began with small things. When I came home from elementary school, snacks were delayed because my mother was busy with Samantha. These small things escalated. From a young age, Samantha was flexible, and once my mother recognized her talent, she started taking her to ballet classes. The weekends were nearly consumed by driving her to and from ballet, and our family's plans revolved around her practices and recitals. Even when I wanted to go to the zoo, I was briskly dismissed with, "We don't have time for that." Family trips were similar. The chosen destinations were always places Samantha was interested in, and I quietly suppressed my own desires. By the time I was in middle school, the daily household chores had become my responsibility. After school, cleaning, laundry, and preparing dinner became my routine tasks, all because my mother wanted to focus on Samantha's practice. This felt beyond mere helping out at times. I felt treated like a servant. And the hardest part was the silent pressure from my mother. Even while I studied, she would frown and ask, "Aren't you done with the laundry yet?" I never heard the words, "Thank you for always helping out with the housework," or "You're doing great," which I longed for. On the other hand, Samantha always received kind words like, "You were wonderful on stage," or "You're really doing well." I felt isolated in my own home, and even when I tried to assert my place in the family, my mother always brought the conversation back to Samantha. As Samantha received accolades for her ballet, I supported her with mixed feelings but believed in my heart that one day, my own worth would be recognized. I dreamed of the day when I could truly live my life freely. By my 3rd year in middle school, I was determined not to expect anything from my family anymore. I had to carve out my own life. By focusing on school club activities and planning to find a part-time job, I began to create my own world. It felt much freer and more authentic. Throughout high school, I worked harder than anyone else and kept my grades at the top of my class. As a result, I received an offer from a prestigious overseas university to study there as a scholarship student with a full tuition waiver. The only issue was covering my living expenses abroad. I brought up this topic during dinner after returning home from school one day. I heard from my teacher that I can study abroad as a scholarship student. The tuition is waived, so if you could just help with the living expenses, I said, my heart swelling with hope. My mother put down her chopsticks and sighed deeply. That's a great opportunity, but we just can't afford it, she said. What? I was stunned by the unexpected response. My father continued. Samantha is going to start lessons with a famous teacher next year, and that's going to be expensive. Supporting her dream is our top priority. But what about my dream? This is the result of all my hard work. I argued desperately. My mother looked at me with a slightly cold gaze. We simply don't have the money to cover your living expenses abroad. Why are you asking for something impossible? Their words pierced me like a knife. Was my effort really worth so little compared to my sister's dream? Unable to secure my parents' support, I had to give up on the idea of studying abroad. Instead, I decided to attend a local university. Why do I have to be the only one who sacrifices? I repeated to myself over and over. Each time, feelings of frustration and loneliness welled up inside me. Still, I had to move forward. Determined to carve out a life on my own terms, I chose a new path. However, just as I was about to graduate from high school, a sudden piece of news came. My grandfather had passed away due to illness. From a young age, my grandfather had always shown me particular affection. When I heard of his death, an indescribable sadness filled my heart. His presence had been significant in my life, and I vividly remember the summer vacations we spent together and how seriously he listened to my plans for further studies. It felt as though a huge hole had been left in my heart. While mourning my grandfather, I graduated from high school and began attending a local university. As a university student, I juggled lectures and assignments while working as a tutor and at a bar in the evenings. I was driven by the desire to fund my own study abroad someday. As I was getting used to balancing my studies and part-time job, I found myself cleaning my mother's room as usual. There I discovered an old envelope. It was addressed to me. Casually checking its contents, I found a letter from my grandfather. It stated that he had left me a substantial inheritance for my study abroad expenses. Tears overflowed from my eyes upon learning this fact. It was a moment mixed with joy from my grandfather's support and anger towards my parents who had kept this hidden. Why should my dreams be cut off by family choices? Is it acceptable to trample on my grandfather's intentions? These questions raced through my mind. I asked my mother about the letter from my grandfather. Her face changed color immediately, trying to maintain her composure. That. I was planning to give it to you, but somehow forgot, she said, lining up a common excuse that tightened my heart. But why didn't you give it to me immediately? If I had read the letter, I wouldn't have had to give up on studying abroad. As I pressed her, my mother shrugged lightly and said, Sorry. I was just too busy with Samantha at the time and forgot about it. Her insincere apology only added to my confusion. Are we done here? As if to protect herself, my mother tried to end the conversation. After speaking with my mother, I continued to harbor mixed feelings. When I inquired about the letter and the inheritance, my mother's vague answers returned. The conflict between not being able to believe her words about forgetting and hesitating to push too hard swirled inside me. Despite these emotions, I continued my days dedicated to making my study abroad dreams a reality by focusing on my studies and part-time job. As soon as my university lectures ended, I would head to the bar where I worked as a bartender. Initially, even taking drink orders was a challenge, but gradually I honed my cocktail-making skills and found the space to enjoy conversations with customers. There were regulars who began to request their unique cocktails directly from me, which gave me a great sense of accomplishment. One night, a regular customer who always sat at the same counter seat spoke up. "You work very seriously. When I come to this bar, I always end up wanting to talk to you." His words brought warmth to my weary heart. As I listened to him, it turned out that he was the president of a top-tier hotel. He was keenly interested in how I started this job and what I aimed for in the future. Slightly nervous, I shared my dreams. "Actually, I would like to study hospitality and culture abroad someday. That's why I'm saving money while continuing my studies." He listened silently to my earnest explanation, then smiled and said, "Your attitude is admirable. Would you like to come and see our hotel?" It was a surprising offer. Never had I imagined that working diligently at a bar could lead to an opportunity directly connected to my dreams. Slightly bewildered, I gratefully accepted his offer. A few days later, guided by him, I visited the top-tier hotel, which far surpassed my imagination with its elegant interior and meticulous service. I was overwhelmed yet deeply moved. During the tour, he told me, "The experience here will definitely be useful for your future. Would you like to work here?" I was taken aback by his words. Filled with gratitude for this unexpected opportunity, I felt a surge of excitement at the prospect of growing in this place. "Thank you. I would like to cherish this opportunity," I said, and decided on the spot to take the job. From then on, my life changed significantly. My days began to revolve around university lectures by day and working at the hotel by night. The job at the hotel was tougher than I expected, with a lot to learn, but as I sincerely engaged in each task, I absorbed new knowledge and skills. Supported by colleagues and superiors, I gradually earned their trust. In this way, I took my first steps in carving out a life on my own terms. After graduating from university, I started working full-time at the hotel, utilizing my cocktail skills and customer service abilities learned during my student days, and gradually mastering new tasks. Through the challenging experiences at the hotel, I felt myself growing bit by bit. After getting a job at the hotel, I moved out of my family home and started living alone. While I felt the sadness of leaving the familiar home, I was also thrilled with the anticipation of independence. My small yet clean apartment symbolized freedom and challenge. 2 years into my hotel job, my sister successfully graduated from high school and was accepted into the vocational school she had longed for. When I heard the news, I felt truly happy for her and proud of her efforts. One day, I received a call from my mother's sister. "By the way, did you know Samantha is going to study abroad to join a ballet company? It seems like it was expensive, but you guys must have saved up properly." Study abroad? Savings. As I responded with curiosity, my aunt continued nonchalantly, "Well, it's quite a sum, isn't it? And they managed to send you to university too. Impressive, isn't it?" Feeling uneasy with her words, I decided to confirm with my mother. "Mom, is it true Samantha is studying abroad? How did you manage the expenses?" My mother's expression stiffened for a moment, but she quickly composed herself and answered, "We paid for it with the money we had saved up for her." "Is there a problem?" At that moment, I could not hide my turmoil. I vividly remember when I expressed my desire to study abroad, my mother had firmly stated, "We don't have that kind of money." At that time, I had no choice but to give up my dream. Yet there was saved money for my sister. Knowing this fact, I felt a tightness in my chest. Why is their treatment of us so different? Every time I felt that my sister was more valued, childhood memories resurfaced. Me being denied the things I longed for, while she easily got them as if it were natural. Emotions that had been simmering in my heart for a long time resurfaced. "Is there a problem?" My mother's casual question seemed to leave no room for imagining the impact I felt. That's why it hurt even more. I wanted to be valued too. I couldn't deny that feeling within me. From that day, I started to distance myself from my parents. The hotel job became a refuge for me, and I found myself immersed in it. Amidst the busy days, I was trying to regain myself. Even when I returned home tired, the sense of accomplishment from work began to support me little by little. One day, my parents suddenly called me home to talk, and there was an ominous air about it. With a sense of dread, I headed to my parents' house. Amidst various anxious thoughts, I was not prepared for what awaited me. Upon entering the house, my father seemed unusually subdued. When I asked, "What's wrong?" my mother opened her mouth with a puzzled look. "Actually, your father was deceived by a friend and lost a lot of money." Surprised, yet trying to grasp the situation, I asked, "How much are we talking about?" Maintaining my composure, I pressed for details, and my mother answered in a low voice. "About $40,000. It was money we had borrowed." $40,000? How are you going to repay it? "That's why we have a favor to ask. Could you lend us some money just for a while?" Confused by the unexpected proposal, yet seeing my mother's earnest expression, I was at a loss for words. However, unable to abandon my family, I eventually agreed to temporarily provide funds by setting up a new account. "All right, but please make sure to repay the money once things settle down." "Thank you, it really helps us a lot," my mother said with tears in her eyes. My father also apologized with a look of regret. However, the unease lingering in the air was not entirely dispelled. Months later, on Thanksgiving, I returned home after a long absence, enveloped by nostalgic smells. As I opened the door, the savory scent of turkey roasting wafted from the back. In the living room, my parents sat on the sofa, and Samantha, who had returned home temporarily from her studies abroad, was there too. Next to her sat her boyfriend. I was a bit surprised and felt a twinge of wariness inside. Samantha was laughing and talking happily with him, and my father began to speak joyfully as he watched them. "Look, isn't Samantha's boyfriend handsome? Plus, he works at that top-tier company," he said. My mother also nodded proudly, unconsciously boasting about Samantha's boyfriend. Each word tightened my chest, and my gaze shifted away. "Mom, you mentioned recently that studying abroad was expensive for Samantha. What happened with that?" I asked cautiously. My mother quickly responded, "Well, she improved her grades, so I gave her a bit more money. But her boyfriend helps out a lot, so it should be fine. His parents like Samantha a lot and support her too." Samantha's boyfriend's parents were wealthy and well-known locally. His family owned a large estate known for hosting lavish parties each year. His father was the CEO of a well-known company, and his mother was a socially influential figure. When Samantha started dating him, I was astounded by his family's status and wealth. The conversation continued with stories about Samantha and her boyfriend. Initially, I listened with a smile, but gradually I grew weary. As the boasts about his achievements and romantic surprises continued without end, I nodded along while inwardly sighing. Even during this precious family time, the focus was solely on her and her boyfriend. I tried to change the subject, but Samantha paid no heed, and I ended up just listening silently. A few days after Thanksgiving, I went to the local supermarket to pick up some groceries. As I walked through the store, I suddenly heard my name called from behind. Turning around, Aunt Dorothy stood there with a smile. "Oh, it's been a while. How have you been?" "Aunt Dorothy. It's been a long time. I'm doing well. And you haven't changed a bit. Thank you. By the way, have you heard about Samantha's engagement party?" "An engagement party?" Surprised, I listened as my aunt continued cheerfully. "Yes. They're planning it for next spring in Hawaii." "In Hawaii? That sounds incredibly lavish." "Yes, they're inviting his family too, so it'll be a bit of a trip." "You're going, right?" Caught off guard by the sudden news, I clenched my shopping basket. "No, I haven't heard anything yet." "How will the party expenses be managed?" "You don't need to worry about that. Dad left Samantha an inheritance, which will be used for that." "An inheritance?" I gasped at the unexpected revelation. While suppressing the urge to confront further, I ambiguously replied. Is that so? But I felt a turmoil inside me. Believing my own efforts had limits, I hired a detective to investigate, and it was revealed that my parents were using the study abroad funds left to me by my grandfather for Samantha's engagement party in Hawaii without my knowledge. Moreover, the lavish plan amounted to more than $40,000. I felt there was something beyond my imagination hidden in my parents' plans, and this realization sparked decisive anger. All the feelings of alienation, unfairness, and being unloved that I had long felt suddenly exploded. One night, taking advantage of my parents being out, I went to my family home and logged into my mother's computer. What I found was more unbelievable than I had anticipated. Information that had been hidden from me now came into view one by one, making my chest tighten. Various reservation details were recorded there. Carefully and with intense emotion, I reviewed the details of the travel booked for Samantha's engagement party. A lavish holiday plan in Hawaii costing over $40,000 was neatly arranged. Initially, the amount didn't seem serious to me, but as I sat there, every feeling of unfairness I had felt lined up before my eyes. I canceled all reservations except for the travel costs. It wasn't about retrieving the large sum of money, but intended as a retaliation against my parents. My initial calmness was nowhere to be found. I proceeded driven by emotion. After confirming the cancellations, I quietly left the house. In the car on the way back, I decided to cut ties with my parents. I felt there was no point in continuing this relationship any longer. As planned, my parents and sister went to Hawaii. But upon their arrival, they learned that all reservations for the hotel and the engagement party had been canceled. My parents were shocked and unable to understand what had happened, attempting to contact me immediately. However, I had already blocked their contacts and no calls or messages could reach me. The situation quickly deteriorated, but I accepted my decision quietly without any regrets. Ultimately, my sister and her boyfriend, along with his parents, had to explain the situation and bear the costs. Later, I heard from my aunt that Samantha had boastfully posted about her engagement party on social media, making my heart ache. I couldn't bear how it seemed to be no problem for her at all. Unable to suppress the turmoil in my heart, I decided to consult a lawyer. When I asked the lawyer to investigate, a shocking fact was revealed. Samantha's study abroad expenses had also been funded by my grandfather's inheritance. Without my knowledge, my grandfather's inheritance had been continually used solely for Samantha. Unable to contain my frustration and anger, I decided to sue for the return of the inheritance. At that time, my parents had just returned from the engagement party in Hawaii. Without any time to relish their pleasant trip, they were bewildered by the documents from the lawyer that had arrived at the house. What does this mean? My father, holding the papers, looked at my mother in confusion. Upon learning that I was formally demanding the return of the inheritance through a lawyer, my parents seemed to realize the seriousness of the matter for the first time. However, my resolve was unshaken. To correct years of unfairness, I decided to fight. Then, I took a step further and directly called Samantha's boyfriend. I told Samantha's boyfriend about my parents borrowing money from me and using the money my grandfather had left for my study abroad for her engagement party. At first, he refused to believe it, saying, "That can't be true." However, I calmly explained the facts and sent him emails as evidence. After a moment of silence, he exhaled softly and murmured, "Samantha never mentioned any of this to me." Eventually, this information reached his parents as well. As a result, my sister and parents completely lost their credibility, and Samantha's engagement was broken off. Samantha had managed to cover her study expenses with support from her boyfriend's parents, but she lost that support too. Ultimately, she couldn't continue her studies, and her dreams were shattered. Samantha blamed me, repeatedly slandering me on social media. The narrative was skewed to make it seem like all the fault was mine. After seeing Samantha's social media posts, my aunt contacted me, and I decided to tell her everything that had happened. My aunt was shocked but believed me and apologized on behalf of my mother for her treatment of me over the years. Even after receiving my aunt's apology, I couldn't bring myself to forgive my mother. The anger towards her betrayal did not subside, and my feelings did not ease. I also felt similarly closed off towards my sister and father. Reflecting on everything, I realized I had been the only one sacrificed while they lived at their convenience. I felt that the trust and affection as a family could never be restored. In the lawsuit, I won, and the money my grandfather had left me was fully returned. The wrongdoing of my parents and Samantha's side was exposed, and the judge recognized my claims. It was a long battle, but I was relieved that my grandfather's inheritance was restored to its rightful form. Though my relationship with my parents was irreparably broken, I had no regrets. I had righted the injustice and protected my rights. I'm sure my grandfather would be pleased with the outcome. I cut ties with my parents and decided to open my own bar using the money my grandfather had left me. Ready to completely change my lifestyle, I invested all my energy into building everything from scratch, without looking back. The menu at my bar featured original cocktails I created, and their new flavors began to spread by word of mouth. Gradually, the reputation grew, and many customers started visiting my bar. In no time, my bar achieved success, and I felt a firm confidence in its accomplishment. Through my aunt, my mother tried several times to contact me, apologizing for the past and trying to rebuild our relationship. However, I ignored all her attempts. No matter what she said now, I no longer wanted any involvement with her, and her attempts only drove me further away. I didn't want to carry the burden of the past and focused fully on living in the present. One night, my bar was bustling with a full house of customers. Across the counter, I saw a scene of everyone smiling and enjoying their conversations, with me at the center. It was a moment when the success I had achieved and the efforts I had made to get here bore fruit. Someday, when work settles down, I plan to go study abroad, fulfilling the dream I once had. Freed from my family, I have carved out my life with my own efforts. I truly felt happy. The lights in the bar softly illuminated the interior, and I smiled quietly to myself.